Chapter 2540. You're no match for me. A wise man submits to circumstances. Just surrender obediently. As long as you listen to me, you may still have a chance to survive for a very, very long time. The eyes of the Cloud Lord's clone revealed an extremely strong and undisguised charm that bewitched one's mind. At the same time, it was also mixed with extreme cruelty. It was like a healthy cat looking at a group of cornered mice. It was enjoying the pleasure of toying with its prey, teasing, ravaging, tormenting, not stopping until it was dead. After this attack, he stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were full of disdain. He could feel that the current situation was completely under his control. Emo Chinji reached out and stopped everyone who was about to charge forward. He took a deep breath and said, 7-star guards, get into your respective formations. Formation of the Tribulation. Sacrificial Maiden, lay air, fill in the gaps. Everyone moved at the same time. Everyone's eyes were full of vigilance and strong caution. Everyone realized that this battle was probably really a battle of life and death. If they lost this battle, everyone would probably vanish into thin air. There was definitely no other possibility. A sword chime sounded again. Chu Yang rushed back like lightning. Although there was still blood at the corners of his mouth, he still stood in front of his brothers. Gradually, his eyes flashed and a fierce fighting spirit soared into the sky. Black saber energy rose at the same time. Dong Wuxiang drew his saber and stood on Chu Yang's left. Amidst the beautiful viburnum flowers, Xie Danxiong stood on Chu Yang's right. Beside Dong Wuxiang and Xie Danxiong were Rui Budong and Luo Kadi respectively. A red shadow flashed and Emo Qinggu soared into the air. Her dreamlike dance moves spread out gracefully, and she stood 3 steps behind Chu Yang. Emo Qinji's white-clothed figure stood in the middle. The purple jade flute shone brightly. Sacrificial Maiden and Emo Lay Air were at the back. They shrank to the center and used their wings to protect their backs. Chu Yang. Rui Budong Dong Wuxiang. Emo Xie Danxiong Luo Kadi. Light Dance Emo Tianji. Sacrificial Maiden and Emo Lay Air. The formation of the entire team was arranged according to this pattern. The formation of the Tribulation Battle Formation. Even though there was the Priest Mother and Emo Lay Air to fill in the gaps, for the real battle formation of Calamity, there was still one person missing. Behind the Priest Mother and Emo Lay Air, there should be another person to be the last guard. At this moment, there were no other candidates. If GMO, who had stayed outside the valley, hadn't been seriously injured, he would have been a suitable candidate. However, at this moment, not to mention that he wasn't here, even if he was, everyone wouldn't feel at ease letting him go into battle. Therefore, he could only use the most primitive Calamity Sword formation to fight the enemy. To deal with this unprecedentedly powerful enemy in front of him. There was no need to leave any path of retreat. If they didn't win this battle, none of them would be able to escape. It didn't matter whether they retreated or not. If he won in the end, everything would be fine, and there would be no need for him to retreat. This was a battle where all means of retreat were cut off. Mo Yuntian's 3 bodyguards were on the other side. They formed a small triangular battle formation on their own, resonating with the triangular formation of Chu Yang's Calamity Sword Formation City. The tip of the formation was aimed directly at Master Yun's clone. A strong murderous aura gradually grew stronger. Everyone do your best. At this moment, Chu Yang's gaze seemed to have condensed into a solid sword light. He stared at Master Yun and instructed softly. We will live and die together. Mo Tianji, Dong Wuxiang, Xie Danxiong and the others said in unison. Chu Yang slowly raised the tip of his Calamity Sword. On the tip of the sword, the extremely bright light seemed to have become a cold light that pierced through the universe. It was ready to be unleashed. He said in a low voice, Heaven. The brothers said in unison, I am the king. Chu Yang's voice gradually became hoarse and resolute. Sword light flashed in his eyes. Brothers are here. I am invincible. Everyone roared together. This sudden roar was like thousands of thunderbolts exploding in the clear sky at the same time. Wherever the sound passed, the entire valley seemed to shake a few times. The 3 bodyguards at the side heard this sound. Suddenly hot tears welled up in their eyes. It was only a short 24 words, but it was as lasting as the sun and the moon. It expressed the fighting spirit and pride of the Calamity Brothers, as well as the incomparable and indelible deep friendship that existed between them. We will do our best. We will live and die together. Heaven. I am the king. Brothers are here. I am invincible. What kind of courage was this? Chu Yang laughed loudly without any fear. He stared at Cloud Lord's clone with an unusually sharp gaze. The tip of his sword seemed to be carrying 1,000,000 kilograms of weight as it slowly rose. Cloud Lord's clone stood in the air with his hands behind his back. He had a faint disdainful smile on his face as he looked at Chu Yang and the others. He had absolute confidence that he could completely defeat Chu Yang and the others' strongest attack. From then on, their confidence would be completely destroyed, and he would be able to control their minds in the future. From this moment on, he would leave a deep impression on them. As the Calamity Sword rose, its aura also gradually increased. The sword light flickered, and it actually caused the entire space to flicker. At this moment, Chu Yang felt that his confidence had swelled without any warning. For a moment, boundless pride soared into the sky. Perhaps it was a long time, or perhaps it was just a moment, but when the tip of the sword finally pointed at Cloud Lord's chest, Chu Yang roared into the sky. Before the roar ended, the wind and clouds surged in the sky, and heaven and earth moved. Without saying a single word, Chu Yang's body had already started to move. As soon as he moved, he floated into the sky. He stood opposite Cloud Lord's clone, and he didn't back down at all. The 8 people behind him didn't even need to use any strength. They had already risen into the sky with Chu Yang. In the next moment, sword light suddenly shot out. At this moment, even Cloud Lord and the 3 guards below him had guessed wrong. The subsequent development of the matter was greatly unexpected. All of them thought that Chu Yang must have something to say before the battle since he had risen and stood in front of Lord Cloud's doppelganger without any intention of backing down. As the saying went, no matter how the battle was going to be, one had to go through the door and say a few words first. Fighting to the death as soon as the battle started. That kind of thing was very rare. Even the simplest fight between hooligans had to start with one side cursing, "Fuck you." Then both sides would really fight, right? But Minister Chu had clearly broken this convention, this time. At this moment he had just assumed a conversational posture, but without saying a word, he brazenly attacked. Moreover, the magnificence of the sword light at this moment had already surpassed all the strange magnificence that could be imagined in history. A bit of cold light shot out, and 100,000 feet of cold light burst out. A dazzling dragon emerged from the void, with specks of flickering light all over its body. It carried the aura of slaughtering the world. It shot forward with indomitable will. Vaguely in the entire sky, there was a delicate red color dancing in the sky. It seemed that there was an ethereal singing coming from beyond the 33 heavens, making it difficult for people to hear clearly. But they couldn't help but be fascinated. And this song and dance, every sound added a lot of strength to this sword. Every movement made the sword light even more beautiful and dreamy, invincible. In the sword light that swept through the world, a domineering black saber appeared again, and saber energy shot out. Thousands of gorgeous flowers accompanied it, and a purple jade flute appeared. The clear sound of the flute quietly sounded, and on the purple jade flute, light purple tassels could be seen floating slightly. At the critical moment, a clear phoenix cry soared into the sky, and a colorful phoenix flew out from the void that was enveloped by the sword light. As the multicolored light flickered, it completely merged with the Calamity Sword. There was also a huge green wolf head. It also suddenly appeared. That was the Wolf King's move, which Chu Yang used with the Calamity Sword. A patch of black fog represented Er's killer move, drifting indeterminately. Everything carried a strong murderous intent. However, everything here was different. Finally, they all merged perfectly into one. This was a miracle that couldn't be achieved at all. How could all the weapons and techniques of completely different attributes be merged into one? Just because of one person and one sword. Turning the impossible into the possible. At this moment, just from the tip of a sword that was completely unrelated to him, a miracle was about to happen. Spiritual attack, physical attack, water and fire attack, all at the same time. Cloud Venerable Master's clone suddenly felt extremely gloomy and furious. There was only one thought in his mind: wrong estimation. Chu Yang was directly sent into the mountains by his attack, which made him have a clear understanding of the strength of these people. He was completely convinced that even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be able to harm him. But in this lesson he realized that he was wrong. What he saw with his eyes and even what he observed with his divine consciousness might not be real. In his long life, this was the first time he encountered such a situation. In this instant, Cloud Master's clone was facing attacks from multiple enemies at almost the same time. But what really made him so depressed that he wanted to go crazy was, his eyes clearly saw different kinds of attacks, and these attacks should have come from at least one person, but his instincts told him that he was facing only one person. It was this one person who gave him a terrifying pressure that was equivalent to the combined attacks of two people and then a few times stronger. And this kind of combined power was definitely more than just a few times stronger. Such an unforeseen event caused the three bodyguards below to be dumbfounded. If this level of attack was facing them, they would probably be turned into ashes immediately, right? They wouldn't be able to resist at all. Or perhaps, they wouldn't even be able to summon up the will to resist before they died. This was the truly most terrifying part. On the opposite side, Cloud Master's clone, who had made the wrong estimation, couldn't maintain his calm demeanor anymore. He suddenly roared, and his body spun abruptly as he used all his strength to resist. For a time, countless snow-white and holy lotuses that emitted a fluorescent light suddenly appeared out of thin air. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. In just an instant, countless lotuses had completely filled the sky, densely packed and airtight. The saint's clone had already disappeared at this moment, which meant that Chu Yang's attack had no target anymore. Chapter 2541. Tens of thousands of lotuses appeared in the air and fell down. Every petal was sharp as the wind whistled and spun. The petals of the lotuses flew out like countless divine weapons, whistling as they attacked. Lotuses appeared and fell continuously. They fell on the sword tip of the Calamity Sword, on the black saber, on the phoenix, on the purple jade flute, on the viburnum flower, and on the red shadows in the sky. Facing such a shocking change, Chu Yang remained silent. He only exerted all his strength, gathering the strength of all his brothers on the Calamity Sword and charging forward. He could feel that the saint's clone was right in front of him. Right in front of him. Although he couldn't see it at all, although so many lotuses that were comparable to divine weapons were an almost insurmountable obstacle, Chu Yang's intuition told him that the saint's clone wasn't far away, just like what Chu Yang was doing now. The saint's clone was also waiting for an opportunity to defeat Chu Yang and the others in one strike. And the crux of this attack was precisely Chu Yang's body. As long as Chu Yang's peak position was defeated, he would retreat and become dispirited. Then the other people's problems would be easily solved. Chu Yang's body now had everyone's strength gathered. If the strongest point was broken, the other forces wouldn't be an obstacle at all. Regarding this, the saint's clone's choice wasn't wrong at all. But the only thing he miscalculated again was the strength that Chu Yang displayed. When a few people joined forces, it didn't necessarily mean that their strength would increase exponentially. This was a principle that everyone knew. Often, when two equally matched experts joined forces, their strength wouldn't be as good as if they were alone. And the more people there were, the more restrictions there would be on their cooperation, and the harder it would be to form a tacit understanding, not to mention attacking together. The saint's clone was just a clone. But he had studied this aspect of human nature quite thoroughly. So, he allowed Chu Yang and the others to gather their strength for this moment. In order to defeat all the forces in one fell swoop, and then completely destroy all the confidence of Chu Yang and the others. But he didn't expect that after Chu Yang and the others gathered together and attacked together, the power that was exerted was actually so great. Not only was there no sign of damage, but there was also a flawless tacit understanding. Especially when everyone was wholeheartedly focused, it was an extreme cooperation that completely disregarded their own safety. In fact, at this moment the word tacit understanding could be used. It was simply not enough to describe the level of cooperation between them. That was a method of completely trusting one's life and handing it over without reservation. Moreover, it was the same for everyone. Otherwise, it would be impossible to reach this stage. The Calamity Sword howled fiercely, crushing all the lotus flowers in front of it. The sword didn't change at all, and the sword light was as sharp as ever. Amidst the petals that filled the sky, the saint's clone suddenly changed his move. His figure moved as if it was a miracle. 3 illusory figures appeared and attacked at the same time, as if they had 3 heads and arms. Due to Chu Yang's miscalculation, Master Cloud's clone was forced to use his trump card in an instant. Clang clang clang. With 3 sword cries, the 3 bodies of the saint's clone each held a sword and performed different moves. The 3 figures fluttered along with the petals that filled the sky with fluttering white clothes. They rushed towards Chu Yang and the others. Its target was the Calamity Sword in Chu Yang's hand. The 3 swords were all real. Even the 3 figures were all real. They had form and substance, real and not fake. Such a strange and unbelievable martial art that was right in front of everyone's eyes made everyone's heart tremble inexplicably. It was clearly just a clone. It already had such shocking strength. They really didn't know how many trump cards this Master Cloud had. Phantom Spirit Transformation. On one side, the three guards exclaimed at the same time. Their strength might be gradually surpassed by Chu Yang and the others, but their accumulated experience over countless years was still not something that Chu Yang and the others could compare with. With just a glance, they had already identified the name of the move used by the saint's clone. The so-called phantom spirit transformation could create many images of oneself in a flash, and these images all had the same power as the original body. They could also hold swords and sabers and fight with the enemy. Although these images only existed for a short period of time and were supported by powerful spiritual energy, they could increase one's strength by several times in an instant. This kind of phantom spirit transformation technique was a realm that they couldn't reach after hundreds of thousands of years of hard work. But at this moment, it was so easily used by the saint's clone. This huge gap almost caused the three guards to lose their fighting spirit. Chu Yang didn't show the slightest trace of fear when facing such a marvelous killing move, nor did he waver in the slightest. With a wild howl, he instantly absorbed the heavy pill and the essence of the wondrous medicine that he'd prepared long ago into his dantian, and they surged and transformed into abundant origin energy. The reason why Chu Yang would react in such a way was very simple. At this moment, the energy that he had gathered previously was almost exhausted. No one had expected that a mere clone of Master Cloud could be so powerful. Both sides exhausted their elemental energy, but the result was that Chu Yang's side was at a disadvantage. The other party even had a lot of energy left. He could even make an extremely sharp counterattack. Even after gathering the spiritual energy of several high-level and peak-level saints, they still couldn't trap Master Cloud's clone. He was actually able to break free and use a killing move like phantom deification. At this moment, although they seemed to be evenly matched for the time being, everyone present knew that they had really reached the point where life and death were decided in an instant. So Chu Yang didn't care about the consequences. He mobilized all the forces that he could mobilize. This concerned the life and death of his 8 brothers and sisters. How could he let his guard down? At this moment Chu Yang was really going all out. Sword intent. Chu Yang roared hoarsely. The calamity sword flashed with green light, and the long-awaited sword intent appeared once again. With an indestructible aura, it surged out crazily. Maybe it was because of the environment, but the sword intent had become unusually heavy ever since it ascended the heavenly imperial court. Every time Chu Yang activated it, he would feel more and more tired. But he didn't know the reason why, so he rarely used it. But at this moment, it was finally the decisive moment of the battle. If he didn't use it, he had to. The long-awaited sword intent whizzed out. In just one exchange, the sword intent's sharpness had already destroyed one of Master Cloud's phantom spirit transformation clones into fragments. After succeeding in the fight, the calamity sword light changed its path and changed into clouds, and clouds gather. As long as I'm alive, I'll be without you. But in the blink of an eye, he defended with all his might. At this moment, clanging sounds rang out one after another. It was as if raindrops were falling from the sky. Master Cloud's illusory swords had already stabbed into the calamity sword's light no less than tens of thousands of times. Every strike was as heavy as a mountain and extremely sharp. If Chu Yang was holding an ordinary sword, he would probably have been smashed into pieces and turned into dust. However, the calamity sword was the #1 divine weapon since ancient times. Although it was tested, it could still withstand it. But it was one thing for the calamity sword to withstand it. Chu Yang's hand that was holding the sword really couldn't withstand it. In that instant, Chu Yang felt as if his hand had broken into thousands of pieces. He almost couldn't hold the calamity sword. The calamity sword's light actually scattered. Clouds and clouds gather. As long as I'm alive, I'll be without you's defense was tight and didn't reveal any flaws. However, the combined might of the 2 phantom spirit transformation clones was too shocking. They almost broke through this unbreakable defense. This was a difference in cultivation and not a flaw in the technique. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji, and the others all opened their mouths at the same time and spat out a mouthful of blood. Clouds and clouds gathered to become emperor. Chu Yang roared hysterically. Sword light flashed in the air again. Thousands of streaks of sword energy shot out in all directions. A crown that was as bright as the sun in the sky suddenly appeared. Emperor's Descent. The clone of the Holy Monarch originally possessed the aura of a monarch descending. However, under this special attack that gathered the winds and clouds as a monarch, the aura of a monarch that was connected with the heavens and earth caused the clone of the Holy Monarch to pale in comparison. Master Cloud's clone finally revealed an unprecedented look of fear in his eyes. The crown suddenly pressed down. Calamity Sword's most ferocious ultimate move finally exploded from Chu Yang's hand. If he didn't succeed, he would die trying. Reverend Cloud's clone let out a shrill cry when he faced the decisive slash. For the first time, he retreated, and his body continuously moved in different directions in midair. He was sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes to the front, and sometimes to the back. He drifted about, and in the blink of an eye, he had already moved in more than 10 million directions. However, Chu Yang controlled the Calamity Sword and charged forward in a single direction without turning back. He didn't change direction at all. He completely ignored the figures that were wandering around him. Mo Qingwu's Heavenly Dance, Mo Qianji's Purple Jade Flute, Rui Butong's Phoenix Transformation, Xia Danxiong's Viburnum Flower, Dong Wuxiang's Dark Saber, Mo Lair's Hidden Weapon, Luo Kadi's Sword, Lady Sacrificial's Wolf Fangs, they all attacked at the same time. At the final moment, "Junior, how dare you?" Master Cloud's clone screamed. Suddenly he rose into the sky. Chu Yang carried the fiercest storm of killing intent in the world and finally changed direction. He charged forward. He didn't seem to be forcing it. He chased closely behind Master Cloud's clone. The tip of his sword was only a few millimeters away from his back. However, that few millimeters was like a moat that couldn't be crossed. Master Cloud's clone was like a bolt of lightning. Chu Yang's Calamity Sword chased after him like a rainbow. Behind Chu Yang, 8 people were following him closely. They were like a long string rushing straight up into the sky. Chapter 2542. None of them had any contact with each other, but they had become an inseparable entity. Wherever Chu Yang went, everyone would follow. At this moment, Chu Yang didn't feel any pressure at all. The entire formation and everyone else felt as if they were part of his body. It was a very mysterious yet very real feeling. Everyone didn't feel any repulsion, whether physically or mentally. They really treated themselves as a part of Chu Yang's body. "We'll follow you. We'll fight you. We'll follow your orders. We'll live and die with you. If you win, we'll follow you into the clouds. If you lose, we'll follow you into dust." As Master Cloud's clone charged upwards, there were still counterattacks. Countless lotus flowers fell like snowflakes, their petals as sharp as knives. Chu Yang's Calamity Sword didn't give up. The moment those petals met the Calamity Sword, they all turned into gusts of wind and brushed past him. The bodies of Chu Yang and the others were already dripping with blood. The destructive power of those lotus petals was still not to be underestimated. Even though everyone had invincible Vajra bodies and their main force had been eliminated by the Calamity Sword, there were still some remnants. It was inevitable that they would be injured. How could it be possible that the lotus flowers that filled the heavens and earth did not touch his body at all? The sword energy transformed into a faint green killing intent as it chased after Master Cloud's clone. Master Cloud's clone fled as fast as he could. He thought to himself, "As long as I can escape from this sword attack and catch my breath, I'll definitely be able to kill all of them." If he knew this, how could Chu Yang and the others not know? In a battle between experts, especially against an expert like Master Cloud's clone, victory or defeat was really decided in an instant. Right now, Chu Yang had spent so much effort to seize this opportunity. How could he let it go so easily? Even if he died, he had to hold on tightly. He just needed to move forward an inch. Chu Yang's gaze was fixed on Master Cloud's back. There, the tip of the sword was just a hair away from Master Cloud's back. It was just half an inch away. As long as the tip of the Calamity Sword could touch Master Cloud's clone's skin, then the devouring power would be unleashed with all its might, regardless of the consequences. As long as he could touch it, there wouldn't be any danger in today's battle at least. However, if he couldn't catch up in the end and failed at the last step, in that case, there was only one outcome today: complete annihilation. There would definitely be no more flukes. All the success and failure. At this moment, on this sword, Chu Yang had already gone all out. During this process, both sides had already pushed their speed to the limit, or even exceeded it. The Holy Monarch's clone could feel a stabbing pain in his back. It was a terrifying shadow that threatened his life. He activated all of his potential and even released the myriad holiness true spirit he had just absorbed into his body. It turned into a push forward. Strictly speaking, this method was akin to drinking poison to quench one's thirst. It was one thing to stimulate all of one's potential, as it was just an avatar, so it didn't matter if it had more potential or not. But detonating the myriad holiness true spirit that had just been absorbed into one's body would have far-reaching effects. The true owner of the myriad holiness true spirit was his main body. In other words, although the avatar of the Sage Monarch could absorb and even borrow the strength of the Sage Monarch, it was only a carrier in the end. It wasn't able to truly display the full might of the sage monarch's true spirit. Forcefully erupting like this was equal to the most extravagant squandering. Moreover, the myriad saint's true spirit also had a limit. It was a tree without roots, a river without roots. In fact, the holy monarch's clone was also very clear about this point. He was clearer than anyone else, but the current situation was truly out of the question. As long as he was pierced by this devil-like sword behind him, what awaited him would be him. That would be the tragic ending of being consigned to eternal damnation. The chilliness of the sword was like a maggot in one's bones, unable to be shaken off. In the process of this stalemate, he had already used at least 300 different movement techniques, but he still couldn't shake it off. The myriad holiness true spirit's power that had just been absorbed into his body had already been nearly exhausted. However, this sword was still following behind him. Although it hadn't really touched his body yet, the distance between them was still not the slightest bit. The concealed feeling of the sword's tip being able to swallow the world was clearly discernible, and there was no falsehood at all. So much so that the holy monarch's clone could truly feel that the sword's eagerness to drill into his flesh and devour him was actually not concealed at all. Not only were these people able to unleash such strength when joining forces, but this sword was actually a demonic sword. A demonic sword that possessed a sword soul. This sudden discovery made the holy monarch's clone even more depressed. The person chasing after him was already exhausted, but he was still persevering. The person running in front was also nearing the end of his life, and it was difficult for him to continue. Between this heaven and earth, it was like two streams of light, one in front and one behind, endlessly chasing after each other. Rushing up, turning around, returning, rushing again. From south to north, from east to west, from bottom to top, and back again, it was simply like an endless monotonous game of death that never stopped. The holy monarch's clone was in a very bad situation, but the same was true for Tribulation's side. Chuyang and the others could clearly feel that their heartbeats were gradually intensifying until they were like drums, almost jumping out of their chests. All the blood in their bodies seemed to have rushed to the top of their heads, as if in the next moment or perhaps in the next moment, their heads would explode from the rush of blood. Even if it wasn't the next moment, and the next moment they could collapse at any time. And as long as any one of them couldn't hold on and collapsed first, everyone would collapse at the same time without exception. The continued stalemate between the two sides had already entered a dangerous situation. Even if one side survived, the other side might not necessarily survive. It wasn't even a situation where both sides would suffer, but a situation where both sides would lose and die. And for Chu Yang and the others, this was still the ideal ending. In this case, the biggest possibility was that Chu Yang's side couldn't hold on first. Below, the 3 7-star guards stared intently at the two streams of light that continued to hover in the sky, chasing each other. Unknowingly, they had already formed a strange formation. Just at the moment when the two streams of light rushed to the sky again and almost disappeared, the 3 people suddenly leaped up at the same time, turning into 3 long rainbows that soared into the sky, shocking the sky. In a flash, they had already rushed thousands of feet into the sky. And at this moment, the stream of light that the holy monarch's clone had transformed into happened to turn back from the highest point, and rushed downwards, accompanied by a sharp whistling sound. The 3 7-star guards made up their minds and without hesitation, rushed towards the stream of light at the same time. 3 magnificent sword lights flashed at the same time. This was a desperate and decisive blow. Everyone present had already clearly seen that although the current situation seemed to be that Chu Yang and the others had a slight advantage temporarily, and had the upper hand, this advantage would definitely not last long. Once the battle dragged on for a long time, the one who would eventually gain the upper hand would still be the holy monarch's clone. In fact, on the surface, it seemed that Chu Yang had the upper hand, but in fact, the one who controlled the outcome of this battle was the holy monarch's clone. After all, the holy monarch's clone had the power transformed from the 10,000 saints' true spirit as a foundation, so no matter how much it was consumed, even if it was all consumed, the impact on his body was relatively limited. However, Chu Yang was consuming his own cultivation, martial power, physical strength and mental strength. Especially physical strength and mental strength. The rest could be recovered with various elixirs such as heavy pills, life spring water and so on. However, physical strength and mental strength were the most difficult to recover. Also, the members who formed the Tribulation formation now were ultimately not the real Tribulation. Regardless of whether it was Mo-Le-Er or the Sacrificial Maiden, they were not the real Tribulation people. No matter how hard they tried, there was a limit to their assistance to the Tribulation formation. Correspondingly, the assistance that the tribulation formation provided to them was relatively limited. Although their own strength was also extremely high because of the difference in their assistance, it would cause a subtle increase in consumption. If there was anyone who could not hold on in this formation, it would definitely be one of the two. In the current situation, the most important thing was endurance, and the two of them were destined to be at the bottom in terms of endurance. Once there was really someone on Chu Yang's side who was exhausted, then everything would really be irreversible. The only solution now, or rather the only way to disrupt the current rhythm of the battle, was to stop the Cloud Lord's clone in this pursuit at all costs. Even if it was just a little bit or even an undetectable moment of stagnation, it would be enough. And this little bit of time, or rather opportunity, would require the three of them to exchange for it with their lives. Otherwise, they would definitely not be able to stop it, nor would they be able to exchange it. At this moment, the three guards made up their minds and made up their minds. 3 magnificent sword lights, with an aura of no return and no turning back, rushed forward. The distance between the two sides was actually very far, but under the situation where both sides were advancing at extreme speed, it was almost a blink of an eye before the two sides had already come into contact. On the opposite side, the light descending from the sky suddenly accelerated again at the critical moment. With a sudden turn, it brushed past the 3 sword lights with a swoosh. As for Chu Yang and the rest, they also followed the shadow of the clone and brushed past the sword lights. The 3 people's suicidal attack missed just like that. There was a faint trace of blood on the tip of the sword. Although the Cloud Lord's clone did not show any signs of slowing down, under this sword, he was finally injured. Everyone could see the current situation clearly. With the strength and cultivation of this clone, it was definitely not difficult for him to kill the 3 guards. As long as he dared to charge head-on, he could kill the 3 of them in an instant. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it was as easy as flipping one's hand. However, the instant he charged and flipped his palm was enough for Chu Yang to stab the Calamity Sword into his body. So he did not dare to. Chapter 2543. Just a little bit was enough to change the outcome of the battle. The 3 of them were determined to exchange their lives for a chance to destroy the enemy. This was something that everyone knew. Therefore, Cloud Master's clone didn't fight back even though he was injured. He only dodged and avoided the situation where his speed slowed down. In his heart, no one else's life was as important as his own. Even if everyone else was added together, it wouldn't be as important as his. He only had one life. He had to protect his own life well. The 3 of them failed to hit him. They raised their sword lights again and waited for another chance. Faced with this situation, Cloud Master's clone was already gritting his teeth. The desperate attacks of the 3 guards had undoubtedly restricted him greatly. This restriction had already made him start to worry about his own life. But what he didn't know was that Chu Yang, who was chasing him from behind, was complaining even more. Because Chu Yang could feel that the cultivation that he had forcefully increased was depleting rapidly. At this stage, it was already starting to run out of strength. The Calamity Sword formation was also showing signs of collapsing. It wasn't because of discord but because of the lack of strength. Sometimes a person's strength was limited. Even if he wanted to, he didn't have enough strength. The flaws in the formation were becoming more and more obvious. The most obvious one was the sacrificial maiden at the back. After all, this beautiful Wolf King wasn't familiar with this formation. Although she had tried her best to trust it, she still couldn't completely integrate herself into it like Luo Kadi. Although Mo Lei-er's situation was similar to hers, Mo Lei-er had spent a lot of time with the Calamity Sword formation. She could be said to be the person who understood the Calamity Sword formation the most in the world besides the Calamity Sword formation itself. Her confidence in the Calamity Sword formation and the Calamity Sword formation wasn't something that the Sacrificial Maiden could compare to. In addition, her own cultivation was also above the Sacrificial Maiden's, so she could still hold on. But the Sacrificial Maiden was already at the end of her rope. If the Sacrificial Maiden couldn't hold on and fell from the team, then it would definitely cause a chain reaction. The battle formation would crumble in an instant, completely collapsing. In fact, everyone could sense this, including the Sacrificial Maiden herself. However, they were powerless against this reality. Chu Yang was also helpless. He had forcefully destroyed the valley several times. His dantian had long been emptied. There was not a single drop left. His vision was turning black. However, he still did not give up. His head, which was in so much pain that it was about to split open, was still racking his brains to come up with a solution. Never give up. Giving up meant death. He could only try his best to hold on and make his final effort. At this moment, Chu Yang really missed the sword spirit that he hadn't seen for a long time. If the sword spirit was still here, he would have more power and could even control the Calamity Sword on his behalf. If that was the case, the battle would have ended long ago. But now all he could do was wait. He was waiting for the moment when the Holy Monarch's clone would turn the tables. Chu Yang had determined at the first moment that the 3 guards were harming him at the cost of their lives. This may have some effect, but it won't play a decisive role. In the end, it couldn't change the overall situation. Then, was there any other way to change this extremely passive situation? So that they could safely defeat the enemy? The more Chu Yang thought about it, the more helpless he felt. Behind him, he could even feel Imo Tianji's burning gaze as he looked at him. He could feel Imo Qingwu affectionately gazing at his back. While Imo Tianji was thinking of a solution, he was also hoping that he could think of a solution. However, Imo Qingwu's love was unreserved. If I win, I'll laugh with you. If I lose, I'll fall with you. I'll follow you in life and death. I can't count on the sword intent. I can't catch up. I can't count on the sword intent. I can't catch up. I'm definitely not his match in a head-on battle. The 3 guards are risking their lives to stop him. It's futile. I still have a strong army, but they are all outside the valley. Moreover, their strength can't affect the overall situation. Inside, except for the 13 people who are fighting with all their might, there's no one else alive. Chu Yang was at his wit's end. The only thing he could do was to mobilize the spiritual energy in the calamity space and use every bit of strength he had. But the feeling of despair in his heart still rose uncontrollably. But the more this feeling rose, the angrier Chu Yang became. Why? We've been through so many life and death battles. Are we going to stop here? We haven't faced the real enemy yet. This is just a clone. Can it destroy us all here? Am I, Chu Yang, not only going to die, but also implicate my brothers and my lover? We still have to bring glory to purple cloud heavens and pacify the demons. There are still many paths ahead for us. I'm not resigned to this. I'm not resigned to this. How can I be resigned to this? An unprecedented violent emotion suddenly rose in Chu Yang's heart. Blood was already flowing out of the corners of his eyes. His eyes were blood red. Right at this moment, the sacrificial maiden finally exhausted her last bit of strength. She was swaying and could fall from the sky at any time. The calamity formation immediately showed a flaw. The remaining people who were barely holding on also couldn't hold on at almost the same time. They were all about to fall. The formation that was originally in a state of dispersal suddenly showed signs of disarray. The 3 guards who were still trying their best to stop him closed their eyes. It's over. This battle is really a crushing defeat. And it's the kind of defeat where we can't turn the situation around. Once the formation is disrupted and the Saint's clone has a chance to breathe, they will immediately suffer the sharpest counterattack. And in such a situation he can even easily strangle everyone to death one by one. He doesn't need to waste any more energy. Despair condensed in front of him. However, at the last moment, Chu Yang suddenly roared to the sky and spat out a mouthful of blood. Everyone naturally didn't understand why Chu Yang suddenly did this. Could it be that he spat out blood because of despair and anger? No. Definitely not. But at the last moment, Chu Yang was finally able to completely gather the small golden person in his dantian and detonate it completely in his dantian, turning it into unparalleled power. Ignoring the excruciating pain that was worse than death, Chu Yang poured all his strength into the calamity sword. With this unprecedented tyrannical power, Chu Yang's body instantly turned into a furnace. He forcefully merged the sword intent and the calamity sword into one. His wrist shook. The calamity sword shot out like lightning with the power of wind and thunder. This sword already tore the space when it was released. The power of this sword, to a certain extent, could even be compared to the destruction of 10,000 tribulations. But Chu Yang didn't dare to use the destruction of 10,000 tribulations. Because he wasn't himself now. Once he made his move, everyone would perish along with him. Then, the meaning of risking their lives would be lost. Thus Chu Yang could only do this. After the sword was released, before the result was determined, Chu Yang's vision was pitch black. He spat out mouthfuls of blood and then he lost all consciousness. He didn't even have time to see whether his sword had succeeded or not. He completely fainted just like that. Behind Chu Yang, the 8 people spat out blood at the same time. Their formation completely scattered in the air, like a fairy scattering flowers. They floated helplessly and fell downwards. The large amount of blood mist in the air almost condensed into a substance. Chu Yang and the others. Almost at the same time they spat out blood, lost consciousness and fell to the ground. The 3 7-stars Imperial bodyguards didn't even have time to catch Chu Yang and the others. They could only watch helplessly as the sword light passed by. That sword flew towards the saint's clone like a meteor chasing after the moon. It was a sword strike that had gathered all of Chu Yang's strength. It was a sword strike that had returned to its original state. Enemy slayer. The saint's clone faced this sword. He was actually scared before the battle even started, and only knew how to dodge with all his might. The fear on his face could be clearly felt even from several thousand feet away. The calamity sword that had lost Chu Yang's control. As if it had a life of its own, it persevered and chased after him. Just like before. The only difference was that the calamity sword was faster than the saint's clone. Maybe it was a long time, maybe it was just a moment. After a flash of light there was a poof sound. The calamity sword was deeply inserted into the saint's clone's back. The saint's clone paused at this moment. He was originally flying rapidly, but he suddenly stopped completely in the air. There was no buffer at all. His face revealed an extremely cruel and desperate look. He used his hand to grab the calamity sword that was already in his body. However, the moment he grabbed the sword hilt, his hand had already become like a chicken's claw. It was actually shrinking all over. He who had no strength to pull out the sword could only let go. Then he started other actions trying to struggle for survival. He could already clearly feel the taste of death, but he didn't want to give up. He only had one life. His desire to survive would never die. He screamed and swooped down quickly. The calamity sword shone brightly on his back, emitting a kind of demonic blood-red light. He rushed towards the mountain wall with the calamity sword just like that. With a loud boom, a big hole was made in the mountain wall. However, the calamity sword was still in his back. The devouring power was still in progress as if it had grown on his body. He screamed and flew out from the pile of rocks. Suddenly he roared and tried again. He actually split his body again. He used the Phantom Spirit Transformation technique again. 3 Phantom Spirit Transformation techniques appeared again. The moment they appeared it wasn't to attack but to escape. Without saying anything they flew in 3 directions in a panic. This time the Saint Monarch's clone was no longer an ordinary phantom, but a real soul phantom. Furthermore, all 3 phantoms were real. As long as any one of the phantoms could escape, then even if the Saint Monarch's body was destroyed and his cultivation was lost, he would still be able to make a comeback one day. Chapter 2544. These 3 figures were real, but at this moment they were all illusions. No divine weapon could cause too much damage to them. This was no doubt the Holy Sage's clone's final trump card. The Holy Sage's clone was confident that once he used this move, even if he was heavily injured, his life would be saved. However, the following changes were far beyond the Holy Sage's clone's expectations. The calamity sword suddenly shone brightly. The 3 silhouettes had already dashed out, but they seemed to be forcefully pulled by an invisible force. Because of this invisible force, the silhouettes were twisted into strange shapes. They tried their best to break free from the pulling force, but they couldn't do so. The faces of the 3 incarnations were all pulled flat and deformed. They let out miserable screams together. In the sky, pieces of space gradually collapsed, and spatial cracks suddenly appeared. The 3 divinity transformation stage cultivators tried to escape into the space crack at the same time, but they were still pulled back by the invisible pulling force. Even though they had turned into thin threads, they were still being pulled back bit by bit. He was absolutely unwilling, but he couldn't get rid of it. He could only be pulled back step by step, inch by inch, getting closer to his own body. The calamity sword trembled and emitted a kind of calmness and coldness. Faint blood-red halos quickly dissipated. The range were getting bigger and bigger. It seemed that they had encountered the delicacy of their dreams and couldn't wait to chew. They couldn't allow this delicacy to escape from their mouths. The Holy Sage's clone screamed in despair. Finally, he seemed to have made an extremely difficult decision. The 3 divine transformation realm cultivators rushed back to his body. In the next moment, his entire body suddenly exploded. His flesh had been reduced to dust. Countless fragments scattered in the sky. At the same time, dozens of faint blood-red lights, mixed with the soul power of the clone, split into dozens of directions and flew quickly. This was the last resort that the Holy Sage's clone didn't want to use. Not only did he explode his own body, but he also had to forcefully split his soul into dozens of pieces. This kind of soul was extremely difficult to reunite and the price was very heavy. However, as long as he could escape, it was worth it. The sword light of the Calamity sword suddenly flashed crazily. It seemed that this guy was very dissatisfied with this move at the last moment. It was very angry. The sword radiance immediately scattered in all directions. Countless tiny sword lights began to chase after the soul force that had exploded and escaped. The 70 to 80 strands of soul power from the Saint's clone were intercepted by the Calamity sword. Most of them, at most, only 1 or 2 strands managed to escape in the end. The Calamity sword stood alone in the sky, flickering with light. It seemed a little annoyed. But in the end it turned around and flew down. The sword light flickered and flew into the space between Chu Yang's eyebrows. It disappeared. All of these things seemed to take a long time to describe, but the process was actually very short. From start to finish, everything had happened in the blink of an eye, in the blink of an eye. At this time, Chu Yang and the others descended from a height of several thousand feet. It was about to touch the ground. In their current state, if they were to free fall like this, there was no exception. All of them would be smashed to pieces, and their brains would be wiped out. At this moment, the 3 great protectors finally woke up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They quickly moved and shook their hands to release a series of powerful qi. He supported the falling crowd and slowly lowered them to the ground. Only then did he realize that everyone, without exception, was unconscious. He believed that no one would know the final result of this battle. After settling everyone down properly, he laid them down flat. The 3 great protectors still hadn't recovered from the battle just now. Until now, they still couldn't believe that they had actually destroyed the clone of a Saint Monarch. It seemed that the strength of this doppelganger was much stronger than many people after this battle. One of the great protectors sighed deeply. He looked at the few young men and women who were still lying on the ground. There was only deep admiration left in his eyes. Yes. This battle, the changes in the battle were so complicated, but the duration was so short. The outcome was decided almost in a moment. Another guard said with some concern in his heart, "But, in this short period of time, how many changes have occurred, how much power has been used by each of them? How shocking and terrifying is that?" The last great protector smiled bitterly. Yes. In this short period of time, the number of times the 2 sides changed their positions is at least more than 100,000 times. The rest can't be calculated at all. Chu Yang and His Majesty the Sky Emperor had the intention to fight with their lives on the line from the beginning. Otherwise they wouldn't have fought so hard and so desperately. Yes. But I keep feeling that there's something I can't figure out. I also feel that it's strange, but I can't put my finger on it. According to common sense, it's definitely impossible to win this battle. When the 3 talked about the battle just now, there was still lingering fear in their hearts. Besides being dazzled and confused, they were even more puzzled. The first suspicious point of this battle is that we all know the Saint Monarch. Although the Saint Monarch might not know us, that Mo Qinji acted like he was unfamiliar with us at the very beginning and didn't do anything pretentious. Is there something we overlooked? One of them frowned and said, "This phenomenon is somewhat puzzling. Even if our disguise is flawless, this clone of the Saint Monarch wouldn't be so stupid as to not recognize the position of his original body, right? In this case, isn't our disguise for nothing?" The other 2 nodded repeatedly. Yes, this matter, we really can't figure out the meaning behind it. Secondly, Minister Chu's cultivation is the highest among our group. Although he's certainly not a match for this Saint Monarch's clone, he shouldn't have been beaten into the mountains by the Saint Monarch in a single move. This seems to be a little fake. Perhaps it's a trick to underestimate the enemy. Another person pondered. I think that's most likely the case. Another person said, if not for this clone of the Saint Monarch would definitely not have waited for the brothers' battle formation to take shape. And if the battle formation didn't take shape, then everything would be empty talk. Perhaps we would have died a few hundred times already. But the most crucial part of this battle is still this battle formation. It forced the Saint Monarch into a state of special disadvantage, and the moment the battle formation took shape, Minister Chu and the rest firmly grasped the initiative and grasped the opportunity. The 3 of them shared one head. But why would the clone of the Saint Monarch allow the battle formation to take shape before making a move? One of the guards said, wouldn't that waste more effort? If it were me, I would have made a move at the first moment. The other 2 sneered in unison, so you won't reach the level of the Saint Monarch in your generation. But they didn't know. Mo Tianji instantly sensed that something was wrong, so he asked, who are you? This sentence would make the clone of the Saint Monarch think, he doesn't know me? Or, why doesn't he know me? And Chu Yang was exquisite. Immediately after, he said, this is the Saint Monarch, This made the clone of the Saint Monarch feel as if he was seen through. It was very unreasonable to not know the Saint Monarch. But if he recognized him, there would be a feeling of a secret being leaked. These two sentences made the clone's mood fluctuate twice in a short period of time. Thus, there was a firm belief: these people must not be allowed to escape. Since this was the case, he couldn't leave first. This was an atmosphere of a battle to the death. The most fundamental purpose was to eliminate the possibility of the Saint Monarch immediately escaping once the situation was unfavorable. Immediately after, Chu Yang took the lead. With his cultivation, even if he was definitely not a match for the Saint Monarch, it was impossible for him to be defeated so miserably in one move. Moreover, the Calamity Sword being caught was even more intentional. The Saint Monarch's one move was enough to determine the strength of Chu Yang and the others. Thus, he was fearless and gave Chu Yang and the others time to set up the formation. Because he also wanted to catch them all in one go, he was afraid that someone would escape and leak the news. With these people entangling him, he was quite confident that a few of them would escape. This was a subtle psychological tactic, and when the Calamity Sword formation was formed, all of this would be logical. For Chu Yang and the others, it was only at that moment that they had a chance to fight with their lives on the line. Every word, every action, every expression, every action, every action, every action, every single one of them was indispensable. The three of them waited anxiously. At the same time, they cleaned up the valley and disposed of the corpses on the ground. Although the corpses were piled up like a mountain, broken limbs could be seen everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. For a saint-level expert, moving mountains and filling seas was as easy as flipping one's hand. Dealing with these things was a trivial matter. A small matter like the sea turning into mulberry fields was done. After dealing with these eyesores, they waited for Chu Yang and the others to wake up. I have to say, the place that Master Yun chose to cultivate the 10,000 Saints' true spirit is really not bad. It's full of beauty. After the three of them finished cleaning up, they were amazed by the environment and praised it. It's really not bad. When we retire from the heavenly court in the future, we can also set up a place like this to live out our remaining years and pass the time. One of them revealed a look of longing. But these few words, intentionally or otherwise, made the other two fall silent. After a long time they laughed bitterly. Live out our remaining years. How can people like us live out our remaining years? Immortality is not necessarily a kind of happiness. Our descendants have all turned into dry bones hundreds of thousands of years ago. Our beloved women have long perished and ceased to exist. Living out our remaining years? To us, these words are too extravagant. Yes, sometimes even I feel lost. I cultivate every day and neglect everything around me. Is it just to seek immortality for myself? Another person sighed. What's the point of such a lonely immortality? Yes. Sigh, such immortality, how much loneliness do we have to endure? How much separation do we have to endure? Actually, I feel that the pursuit of immortality, to put it bluntly, is nothing more than the fear of death. This guard's words made the other two roll their eyes. Chapter 25:45. No wonder Luo Kadi kept calling him his brother, his boss. No wonder everyone treated each other like this, so that's why all of them were sacrificing like this. As the boss, Chu Yang did not hesitate to go to the extreme and self-destruct his dantian for the safety of his brothers. The sacrificial lady was very clear that at that time, if Chu Yang was even a little bit selfish, given that he had complete control over everyone, it would be easy for him to make anyone self-destruct their dantian. The mentality of sacrificing one's friends but not himself, especially for martial artists. Even to go all out and make everyone else self-destruct their dantians, leaving only Chu Yang alone, it was just a matter of a thought. It could be done with just a thought. However, at this time where there was bound to be sacrifice to ensure the safety of others, as the boss, Chu Yang, chose to sacrifice himself without hesitation. It turned out that in this world there was really such a sincere relationship. There was really such a selfless friend who could sacrifice for his friends. At this moment, the shock that the sacrificial lady received was really incomparable. Time passed little by little. Everyone surrounded the unconscious Chu Yang and waited for him motionlessly. Mo Qingwu had already carefully wiped Chu Yang's face clean. At this moment, Chu Yang was still unconscious. Everyone was guarding him by the side, waiting for their boss to wake up. Everyone's face was heavy, tears flowing down their cheeks. They were all men who had survived hundreds of battles, but at this moment they were extremely weak. Chu Yang was still unconscious, not moving at all. Every time the brothers looked at him, sorrow came from their hearts, unable to be severed. Boss, why are you so silly? Chu Yang felt that he had fallen into a strange world. Before he fainted, he knew that he was really done for. He could also feel the extreme pain coming from his body, as if he was being cut into pieces. However, at the moment when his dantian self-destructed at the same time, the pain that had just risen, just when he could not bear it, suddenly all disappeared. As if all the pain had been taken away. It also seemed to be his soul, leaving the body that was filled with trauma. Then, with a swoosh, he was wrapped in a glowing tunnel, instantly breaking through the nebula. Then, without knowing why, he felt that he had clearly seen another world. Then he naturally entered this world. At first, Chu Yang had thought that he had died and had gone to the so-called heavenly kingdom, the netherworld, or even the netherworld. However, when he looked around, he felt that this shouldn't be the heavenly kingdom. In that world, the heavens were limitless. The earth was boundless and the stars were densely packed. The sun and moon seemed to rise and descend beside him. Looking at the sun in front of him that was countless times bigger than him, he couldn't feel any heat at all. What kind of place was this? This place seemed to encompass the universe and he was only a grain of sand in Taitsong. But why was this place? Chu Yang asked himself in bewilderment. He couldn't figure it out no matter how he thought about it. He was very clear about the decision he had made in that instant. Even if he was lucky enough to survive by exploding his dantian, he would probably have no hope in martial arts in the future. However, he would never regret it. It is my responsibility to protect you. If boss didn't pay the price, who would? This was a matter of course. In addition, Chu Yang was also very clear about this. Even if he wasn't dead, he should still be in a deep coma. In a world like this, regardless of whether it was the netherworld or the Yang Pass, none of this should have happened. Then, was everything in front of him just a dream? An illusion of a dream? But this illusion was a little too realistic. All of a sudden, Chu Yang suddenly felt that his body seemed to be floating slowly, wandering in the sky. Although it wasn't as he wished, it was still pleasant. In this world, there was only a glowing palace at the very top. Above the palace entrance, there seemed to be 3 words shining brightly. In this light, Chu Yang tried hard to see what words were written on it, but he only felt a piercing pain in his eyes. He couldn't see anything clearly. He could only vaguely remember that there was one word, and it seemed to be the word heaven. The moment he saw this palace, Chu Yang had a strong feeling. It's lonely at the top. Heaven is below me and only I am above. This palace seemed to be above the heavens and the earth and above all things in the world. Perhaps, there was already no one who could stand shoulder to shoulder with this palace. No one could stand shoulder to shoulder with it. Even heaven and earth couldn't. Then, who was the person who lived in this palace? In the distance, dragons roared and phoenixes cried. A few golden dragons and phoenixes that were hundreds of thousands of feet long flew over, covering the sky and earth. Even the sunlight was blocked by their huge bodies. It was as if dark clouds covered the sky, and only darkness could be seen between heaven and earth. Chu Yang had seen Ao Shiyun and Rui Badong transform into divine dragons and fire phoenixes many times. Chu Yang had praised them more than once, especially the dragon that Ao Shiyun transformed into. From head to tail, it was no less than a few thousand feet. But now that he saw the golden dragons and phoenixes of this realm again, he felt that Ao Shiyun and Rui Butong's transformations were at most small dragons and phoenixes. But the golden dragons and phoenixes seemed to be shrinking. As they approached the palace, they shrank. The closer they were to the palace, the smaller they became. When they flew to the front of the palace entrance, the dragons and phoenixes that were originally hundreds of thousands of feet long became only tens of feet long. They didn't even look at Chu Yang when they passed by him. They just flew straight past him. Then the golden dragons circled around and attached themselves to a huge pillar. The phoenixes flew one round and also perched on another pillar. Then the 2 pillars that the dragons and phoenixes perched on had already become exquisite works of art with dragons and phoenixes carved on them. Chu Yang looked at the pillars that were almost able to support heaven and earth. He couldn't help but blink in shock. On these pillars, there were countless golden dragons and phoenixes. There seemed to be other kinds of divine beasts as well. He recognized some of them, but most of them he didn't. Could they all be those terrifying existences just now? This palace that was above heaven and earth floated in the air just like that. But the feeling it gave off was that it was grand and majestic. It was as if no one could make this palace change, not even the slightest bit. It was as if heaven and earth had already existed. This palace had already existed. Or maybe this palace had already existed before this heaven and earth existed. It represented eternity. Chu Yang tried to take a few steps toward the palace entrance. Just as he was about to reach the entrance, he suddenly felt a terrifying pressure coming from the front. The pillars were carved with dragons and phoenixes, as well as all kinds of divine beasts. One of them suddenly opened its eyes and looked at him coldly. There were no words and no further movements. Chu Yang had only opened his eyes, but he could clearly feel that if he dared to take another step forward, his soul would scatter and scatter. He would become a delicacy in the stomach of this divine beast. This signal was extremely clear. It was extremely bad. Chu Yang was shocked and stopped in his tracks. That divine beast looked at him coldly. It also didn't move. However, that kind of earth-shattering pressure had already taken shape. It had turned into a substantial storm, and was constantly spiraling in front of Chu Yang's body. A strong feeling of shock rose in Chu Yang's heart. There was actually such a divine beast in the world? These dragons, phoenixes and beasts. The pressure they gave him was too strong. Or should he say too terrifying? It couldn't be any stronger. Chu Yang had never seen such a thing in his life. It should be because the strength of these dragons and phoenixes was too terrifying. It seemed that any one of them was already stronger than the clone of Master Yun. In fact, even Donghuang Shui Leihan, who was the strongest among all the people Chu Yang knew, was stronger than them. She might not be able to do so. What did this mean? Any one of the dragons and phoenixes here had the same level of strength as Shui Leihan. Note any one of them. They even surpassed Shui Leihan's peak cultivation. And these dragons and phoenixes were just decorations in this palace. They were just decorations and couldn't even be considered as guards. Then what level would the real guards and owner of this palace be at? Wasn't that terrifying enough? Chu Yang subconsciously stopped. He raised his head and quietly looked at this majestic and solemn palace in front of him. His gaze was calm and peaceful. He, who was used to going through great storms. It was no longer easy to be shocked or to be intimidated. No matter how terrifying their strength was, it was no big deal unless they were dead. He understood everything with a single thought. After going through so many life and death experiences, naturally, the spirit of looking down on life and death was already formed in him. After a long time, the palace was still a palace. Chu Yang was still Chu Yang. He even started to pace slowly with his hands behind his back. It was as if this majestic palace in front of him didn't represent the supreme authority of the world, but merely a work of art that was worth admiring. Those dragons, phoenixes and beasts were just purely decorations. And this place was naturally a tourist attraction. He only had one identity, a tourist. That was all. After another long time, a soft chuckle sounded and said, "Not bad." As this voice sounded, the terrifying pressure in front of him suddenly disappeared. It was as if there was nothing and the world was clear again. The divine beast on the pillar closed its eyes slightly. It didn't move at all. Chu Yang raised his head. Then, he realized that in front of him, a young man in white had appeared out of nowhere. This young man in white was tall and handsome. His eyes were as clear and boundless as the starry sky. However, his face gave off an instinctive feeling of coldness. Just by being glanced at by this pair of eyes, Chu Yang felt as if he was standing naked on a mountain peak. Even his thoughts were seen through at a glance. Everything about him was exposed to this pair of eyes. "Who are you?" Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and asked in a very polite and respectful tone, which was very rare for him. The young man in white looked at him with a warm smile. "You will know who I am one day, but not now." Breaking out in the wee hours. Monthly votes list. Here we go again. The final madness. Chapter 2546. Chu Yang replied with an "oh" and said, "Then why am I here?" The young man in white looked at him with interest. "Didn't you think you were dreaming just now?" Chu Yang smiled and said, "But now I'm sure I'm not." The young man in white asked with interest, "Why?" "Because if I'm dreaming, I'm afraid I can't have such a dream for now." Chu Yang smiled and said frankly, "Dreams aren't reality. A thought is born. How do you know that you can't have such a dream?" The young man in white also laughed as if he was chatting with an old friend, casual and easygoing, and his voice was warm. "What I see in a dream, if it's not man-made, is limited by my own vision. With my experience and knowledge, I can't have such a grand dream." "Can I discuss something with you?" Chu Yang suddenly said. "Why did you suddenly say this when we were talking? What's the matter?" The young man in white asked with interest. "Can you not look at me like that?" Chu Yang said something that seemed to be very thought-provoking. "Look at you. How am I looking at you?" The young man in white really didn't understand Chu Yang's words this time. Your eyes are too sharp, as if you can see through everything about me. Everything. Forget about the 5 viscera, the original spirit, and the primordial spirit. That thing has been seen by you. Although it's nothing much for a man to look at another man, it's still very embarrassing. Can you restrain yourself a little? After all, I'm not a woman. Chuyang smiled and said, I've always been very shy. The young man in white was stunned when he heard this, and then he laughed. He laughed joyfully. You're an interesting child. You're really too interesting. Before I said this, I didn't know you were such an interesting kid. Chuyang was speechless. Looking at this guy's face, he seemed to be only a few years older than him, but he actually called him a kid so naturally? Looking at my face, I'm older than you, okay? Cough cough. Let's go back to the original question, how did I come here? Chuyang ignored the question of being called a kid and asked persistently. He knew that this topic couldn't be discussed. Although this guy in front of him looked young. He was definitely an old monster who had lived for God knows how many years. Once the discussion started, his identity as a child would be completely confirmed. That would be too damaging to his self-esteem. If you changed your appearance to that of a white beard, it would be more acceptable. But, to call me a child with such a tender face, because I wanted to see you, the young man in white said indifferently. So you're here. Chuyang, how could he say that? It seemed to be getting more and more. You want to see me? Do I have to come? No matter when? As if he had seen through Chuyang's thoughts, the white-clothed youth smiled and said, Yes, whoever I want to see, he will appear here. It doesn't matter if he's alive or dead, or what world he's in. As long as he exists in this world, it's just a thought from me. Chuyang clicked his tongue. This sentence was even more awesome. In the past few days I've heard people say that you're a pretty good kid. The white-clothed young man said indifferently, I was a little interested and wanted to take a look. Today I saw you. Not bad indeed. Someone said that I'm not bad? Chuyang was a little surprised. Who is it? Someone I know? It doesn't seem to be someone you know. I can only say, it's the person who said that you're not bad. He's a guy with high standards. The white-clothed young man smiled gently and said, to be able to say that you're not bad from his mouth? In such a long time you're the first one. Well, to be more precise, you're the only one. Chuyang smiled bitterly. I didn't expect that I'm so powerful. Whether or not you're powerful is a matter of opinion. It's just that we're fated to meet today. The white-clothed young man stepped forward and said, Come, I'll show you around. Then Chuyang felt that he had entered this majestic palace. The moment he entered, he clearly saw that the carvings of dragons and phoenixes on the pillars and all kinds of divine beasts lowered their heads at the same time. It was a kind of worship that prostrated themselves on the ground. In an instant, the scene flashed and a garden appeared in front of him. A young girl in white was walking slowly in the garden, as if she was going to walk under the blooming flowers and trees. This young girl in white was holy and gentle all over. Her beauty was unparalleled in the world. Her temperament also made one's heart feel tranquil. As long as one was by her side, one could feel a kind of natural peace and tranquility between heaven and earth. As soon as she saw the two coming over, the young girl in white came to his side and asked gently, Master, who is this? The white-clothed young man patted her head a little dotingly and said, How many years has it been? How many times have I told you, don't call me master anymore? You've been an empress before, how can you still call me that? The young girl in white smiled gently and said, No matter how many years have passed, you're my master. The white-clothed young man chuckled and no longer forced her. He said, He's a very interesting child. I'll show him around. The young girl in white nodded obediently. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she suddenly said, Oh right, master, Jian went out to fight again these few days. It said that it's with that old black. He's never stopped. She wrinkled her nose as if a little girl was complaining. Chuyang almost laughed out loud. The white-clothed young man shook his head helplessly and said, If he stops, he won't be Jian. That guy too, what's the point of fighting that guy again and again? It's not that he doesn't respect us, he just doesn't want to call me master. This is also a reason, but he's still so relentless and has been fighting him for so many years. Master, it's not like you don't know about Jian's temper. Only the two of us can talk to him. Who else has he listened to? It's rare to have an opponent, it's not easy. The young girl in white rubbed her eyebrows in distress. That's also true. Let him fight. The white-clothed young man actually skipped this topic and said, Anyway, he won't be broken. Alright, that guy didn't come these few days, right? He didn't come. The young girl in white clearly knew who her master was talking about. She smiled sweetly and said, That guy joined forces with Old Black last time and beat Jian badly. After that, he didn't dare to come again. He's afraid of being beaten. The white-clothed young man couldn't help but laugh. The road of life is long. After such a long time, I really haven't seen anyone more slippery than that guy. Chu Yang cursed in his heart. You haven't seen GMO Luo Kudi Tan Tan? If you see them, you will feel that there are still many shameless and slippery people in this world. After saying a few words, the white-clothed young girl left. Chu Yang continued to follow the white-clothed young man around the palace. He guessed in his heart, this white-clothed young girl looks like a maid. Jian is their son? Old Black is their son's classmate? Or a friend, an opponent or something? Finally he couldn't help but ask, this is? The white-clothed young man said, yes. Just now this is my wife. Chu Yang opened his mouth, thinking that this was really strange. His wife called him master. He asked carefully, that Jian is your son? The white-clothed young man looked at him with a strange face and said, don't talk nonsense, Jian is my brother. Chu Yang opened his mouth again. In that instant he felt a little flustered. The way this family addressed him. It didn't seem a little strange. What was this and what was this? That Old Black is? Chu Yang felt that he had heard this name from someone before, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it. That Old Black. The white-clothed young man looked at him with a smile. You really have a lot of curiosity. Chu Yang rubbed his nose, not feeling embarrassed at all, and said, the desire for knowledge is human nature. Who doesn't have a little curiosity? The white-clothed young man laughed. Since this is the case, seeing that you are pleasing to the eye, let me satisfy your thirst for knowledge. Come with me. He took the lead and walked away. My soul has been out of my body for such a long time, will there be any problems? Chu Yang was a little hesitant. Chu Yang was also a great expert in cultivation. He had exploded his dantian, but he was still able to move freely at this moment. There was only one explanation, that his soul had left his body and entered a special place. But his soul had been out of his body for a long time, and his current situation was extremely bad. He was afraid that there would be problems, so he asked, don't worry with me here, how can there be any problems? The white-clothed young man said indifferently. This was just a simple sentence, but for some reason, the moment it came out of the white-clothed young man's mouth, Chu Yang clearly felt that the entire universe was trembling. It seemed that this sentence of the white-clothed young man was filled with the feeling that everything was under his control, that it was simply the supreme will of the heavens. It was even above the will of the heavens. While Chu Yang was carefully thinking about the meaning of this sentence, he heard the white-clothed young man say, do you feel that you have been here for a long time? In fact, in your world, time hasn't moved. This is an application of the relative stillness of time, but you can't understand it at the moment. The white-clothed young man said indifferently, but when the time comes, you will naturally understand. An application of the relative stillness of time? Chu Yang was a little shocked. The same person here, time is the same as usual, but the body on the other side can't feel the passage of time. You can say that, although you are a little narrow-minded. The white-clothed young man nodded slightly. Narrow-minded? Then can I understand that if the soul here has died of old age tens of millions of years ago, but the other side where time is relatively still is still young? Chu Yang opened his eyes wide. Although it's still a narrow-minded understanding, it's theoretically correct. The white-clothed young man looked at him with some interest. This is just a small trick, it's not worth studying so seriously. There are many other applications such as turning back time, one can see 1,000 years later at a glance, the sea is like a drop of water, the universe is like a grain, it's nothing more than the transformation of time and space. It's really nothing, I'm too lazy to say just a sentence, you will understand when the time comes. Chapter 2547. Chu Yang coughed and resisted the urge to ask further, as well as the speechlessness in his heart. He originally thought that seeing those terrifying dragons, phoenixes and beasts today was already very shocking. But he didn't expect that what was truly shocking was not even in the eyes of the owner of this place. There was actually someone who could use his own cultivation to do this? Relative time? And he even claimed that this was just a small trick? Such a small trick, how heaven-reaching, how frightening was its power. If someone could create such a space for himself, only half a day had passed outside but 1,000,000 years had passed inside. If he practiced like this, wouldn't he be able to create a peerless master overnight in the eyes of outsiders? If such a method was used to cultivate talents, what kind of talents could be cultivated? This was the thought that flashed through Chu Yang's mind in an instant. What he didn't even know was that it was this strange idea that flashed through his mind today that would create another peerless mighty figure that would dominate the universe in the future. Well, this seemed to be the story of another book. The next book will start this story. In front of him, a door appeared out of thin air. The young man in white said lightly with his hands behind his back, "With your current cultivation, you can read 2 books in there. After you finish reading these 2 books, you can go back." Chu Yang looked at him doubtfully. "Read books? Read 2 books? Read what books?" He thought to himself, "You brought me here like this, just to let me read 2 books? The young man in white laughed and said confidently, "Whatever makes you happy. You can read whatever book you want. You can read whatever you want. Everything is there. But, you are only allowed to read 2 books. What you read in the end will depend on your own luck." Then, his whole person went into a trance and suddenly disappeared without a sound. A voice came from the sky. We will meet again one day. At that time I will allow you to read books in there for a month." The laughter still echoed in his ears. The young man in white had completely disappeared without a trace. Chu Yang turned his head to look. He saw that there was already a vast sea of clouds behind him. All he could see were white clouds and gray dogs. As for the majestic palace, it was all gone. But the house in front of him was clearly a part of the original palace. The palace was gone. The study room was still there. He shook his head. He stopped thinking about these mysterious things that were beyond his comprehension and walked forward. The door suddenly opened on its own. The next moment, Chu Yang felt that he had entered that room. As far as the eye could see, he only felt that his brain was really not enough. Inside this room there was actually an incomparably vast space. This space was so big that Chu Yang felt that it was at least comparable to the territory of a kingdom in the lower 3 heavens. Every bookshelf. They were actually as tall as a mountain. This space, is a study? In this vast space, there were rows and rows of neatly arranged books. "I can only read 2 books, tsk, how interesting." Chu Yang inexplicably thought of this sentence at this time. Suddenly he felt an inexplicable sense of joy. He couldn't help but mutter, "He threw me into a sea of books and only allowed me to read 2 books. What a strange person." Seeing so many books at once, even Chu Yang couldn't make up his mind for a while. He believed that even if all the books in a country were to be added up, there wouldn't be so many books, right? But Chu Yang also knew that since there were books here, there definitely wouldn't be any duplicates. Then what do I want to read? What can I read in the end? Chu Yang stood at the door and fell into deep thought. If he couldn't determine what book he wanted to read before reading, then it meant that he would have wasted this opportunity. Moreover, Chu Yang realized that this out-of-body experience was definitely an unparalleled immortal opportunity. If he missed it, he would regret it for life. So he just stood there and asked himself, "Chu Yang, what do you want to read? What do you need?" For a moment, Chu Yang really didn't know what he wanted. He didn't know if it was far away or in another space next door. Just now, the white-clothed youth gently held the white-clothed girl's waist and used his hand to draw in the air. Suddenly, a mirror appeared in the air. In the mirror, it was the scene of Chu Yang in the study room. No matter how big or small, everything could be seen. Looking at Chu Yang standing in the study room in a daze, the white-clothed youth smiled meaningfully. There seemed to be a hint of mischievousness in his smile, as if he had played a prank on Chu Yang. "I say, why are you still so naughty?" the white-clothed girl said gently, giving him so many books at once but only allowing him to choose 2 books. "Aren't you deliberately making things difficult for him?" The white-clothed youth smiled. If it was an ordinary person, he would be forever lost in it. If it was a scheming person, he would also be lost in it. If it was an indecisive person, he would also be lost in it. He smiled faintly. "Don't look down on it. It's just a study room, but in the world, there might not be one person who can really find the 2 books they want to read." His eyes looked into the distance and said, "However, I have only seen one person who can choose the book he wants to read the most in the shortest amount of time." A strange smile appeared on his face. "Oh," the white-clothed girl asked. "It's Wuxia." The white-clothed youth smiled. "So it's him." The white-clothed girl understood and then asked curiously, "What book did that little rascal choose?" The white-clothed youth finally could not help but smile strangely. He chose the complete collection of Firmament erotic illustrations. What? The complete collection of Firmament erotic illustrations? The white-clothed girl was stunned. She stuttered. Her bright and beautiful eyes opened wide. Then she started to stammer. Then her face turned red and she said angrily, This little rascal dares to be so disgraceful. Of all the things to choose, he actually chose that. The next time he comes, I will train him. I will beat him up with my own hands. The white-clothed youth's prank succeeded in framing someone. He laughed loudly and seemed to be extremely happy. He thought to himself, if that guy knew that Chino was going to train him, he probably would not come in this lifetime. It seems that I can really have peace for many years. The white-clothed youth looked at Chu Yang in the mirror and his eyes finally showed appreciation. He said, just the first step alone he has already passed. In the face of so many temptations in front of him, he can finally calm down and think carefully about what he wants. This is already very rare. The white-clothed girl also praised. This young man's temperament is very similar to yours. The white-clothed girl turned to look at the white-clothed youth. He plans before acting, his mind is tenacious, his personality is persistent, and he values relationships. The white-clothed youth nodded deeply, but he is not as ruthless as me. The white-clothed girl snuggled in his arms and said, yes. But this is not necessarily a bad thing. Your ruthlessness is because of your experience, but he does not have your experience. On the other hand, you do not have his experience. That makes sense. The white-clothed youth's eyes moved and said, he finally moved. In the mirror, Chu Yang opened his eyes and took a step forward. At this moment, Chu Yang had already woken up, completely woken up. What do you want? What I want is eternity. What I want is eternity. What I want is the permanence of everything I care about. Eternity. This was what Chu Yang longed for the most. But what do I need to use to get my eternity? This is what I want to choose today. Martial arts. Actually, I don't need 2 books, I only need to read one. Chu Yang's footsteps were firm as he stepped forward. A moment of enlightenment, a moment of enlightenment, an instant of enlightenment. On the first bookshelf, 10,000 schools of thought. Then row after row all of them were. Chu Yang only glanced at them without the slightest hesitation or pause. He walked over. Looks like he still chose martial arts in the end. The white-clothed girl sighed softly, seemingly a little regretful. He did not pass. You're wrong. The white-clothed youth quietly watched Chu Yang's movements and said, he also passed the second round. Passed? What? The white-clothed girl asked puzzledly. Last time, those who chose martial arts in the second round were all eliminated by you in the end. Why did you let Chu Yang pass when he also chose martial arts? Because Chu Yang chose martial arts because he had a purpose and something to pursue. He clearly knows why he chose martial arts. His real purpose is actually for love. The white-clothed youth said slowly, in order to protect, martial arts is just a means to him, a means to achieve the goal, not the real ultimate goal. And those who I eliminated before, they did it purely for martial arts. Their only goal was martial arts. There is a fundamental difference between the two. The white-clothed youth said, Chu Yang's greatest strength is actually his greatest weakness, that he can't let go. He sighed softly, since he can't let go, he has to protect. And once he has the ability, it is true that when a man achieves the Tao, even his chickens and dogs can ascend to heaven. He will never let go of anyone he cares about. This is his greatest weakness, that he is too tired of living. But today, it is precisely because of this greatest weakness of his that he passed this round. The white-clothed youth smiled slightly. You are wrong, I don't think so. In my opinion, this is not a weakness at all, but a strength through and through. The white-clothed girl said discontentedly, being responsible, unable to let go, being responsible, these are the most valuable qualities of a man. Chapter 25:48. That depends on one's ability. The young man in white said deeply, when one has the ability to do all this, that's an advantage. But when one doesn't have the ability and still can't let go of anything, that can only be the biggest weakness. In the end, one will die of exhaustion and achieve nothing. Moreover, such a person has too many constraints. Once his family members are threatened by the enemy, it's equivalent to grabbing his weakness. At the same time, it's also touching his reverse scale. Such a person's life is really very tiring. The young man in white looked a little disappointed. Looking at Chu Yang, he was actually a little lost in thought, as if he was thinking of something from the distant past. The room suddenly became silent. The young girl in white slowly reached out and silently hugged his waist, as if silently comforting him. She said softly, tonight? I heard that Sister Yen and Sister Ro have specially made delicious food for you. The young man in white smiled. Is that so? Then I'll really be in luck tonight. Step by step, Chuyang walked past thousands of bookshelves. Tens of thousands of bookshelves. He glanced at them all and didn't stop at all. Until here, he had already come into contact with the martial way. Regarding this, Chuyang still only glanced at it briefly. He walked past tens of thousands of bookshelves in the blink of an eye. Finally, his footsteps began to slow down. Here, the bookshelves were still bookshelves, but what was placed on them were no longer books, but pieces of sparkling jade. Sparkling and sparkling. Chuyang knew that this was the legendary jade scroll of the highest level that recorded the secrets. This kind of legendary thing that people might not see even once in their entire lives, was actually hundreds of thousands of them here. They were placed everywhere on the bookshelves. The closer to the end, the better it seemed. However, Chuyang stopped in front of the first bookshelf. He saw a jade scroll. Fluorescent light flickered on it and there were a few words on it. So-called Dao. There were only these 3 words in total. Chuyang stepped forward without hesitation and took the jade scroll in his hand. Then he released his divine sense to check it. Someone once said that Dao can be Dao, but it is not an ordinary Dao. However, what is Dao and what is not an ordinary Dao? Dao. It is Dao. People are different from people. Dao is different from Dao. A person exists in the world. There was always a way. However, if someone is wrong, their whole life will be ruined. If someone is right, they will give up halfway. This is also a regretful matter. Since ancient times, who could truly grasp their own Dao? Walking down this path without regrets. How do you choose your own Dao? When Chuyang saw this, he knew. This was what he was looking for. What he wanted to find was his own Dao, and the contents of this book could help him. Finding one's own Dao and surpassing one's own Dao would benefit everyone around him. His lovers, brothers and parents. Family. Then he released his spiritual energy, completely enveloping the jade slip. Then he felt a burst of violent turbulence in his mind. The contents of the jade slip surged into his mind like a great river. He didn't know how much content there was inside. It was as if there was no end to them. Chuyang closed his eyes and slowly absorbed the energy. Bit by bit, he didn't miss a single drop outside. The young man in white sighed from the bottom of his heart. He passed the 3rd level perfectly. Even I didn't think that he would really stop here. Moreover, he chose this piece of land. The young girl in white asked softly, "If I remember correctly, this should be the book you wrote, right? And it's the only book in the entire library that you wrote with your own hands." The young man in white nodded slightly. "That's right. This is that book. And it was after writing this book that I truly stepped into the supreme great Tao. But this book is not about martial arts after all. It doesn't even belong to the category of martial arts." The young girl in white said, "There's only your comprehension in it. Yes, the content inside is not purely about martial arts, but it includes all." Das. The young man in white smiled faintly. "Actually, obtaining this book is equivalent to obtaining half of the library." The young girl in white opened her eyes wide in surprise. "Now it's time to look at the 4th level." The young man in white's eyes flashed. "If he can really? Then this Chuyang's future achievements will not be inferior to anyone." "Ah? Aren't there only 3 levels? Why is there a 4th level?" The young girl in white was a little surprised. "Let's wait and see." The young man in white smiled. "Only he will appear in this 4th level." In the void image, Chuyang closed his eyes peacefully, concentrating on digesting the huge amount of information in the jade slip. After a long time, the magnificent light emitted by the jade slip finally weakened gradually, and finally only a soft sound was heard. With this soft sound, the jade slip quietly turned into fragments. Countless fragments slid down from his fingers. Chuyang, who was in the situation, let out a long sigh. This jade slip was actually a one-time use. If he couldn't accept it all at once, it would cause an irreparable regret. Looking at the huge amount of information inside, and even some very scattered, Chuyang felt as if he had suddenly entered an unparalleled treasure trove. Although he knew that this was what he was looking for, he didn't expect that he would gain so much from it. There were many theories that he had never seen or heard of before. For example, this sentence. Some things can be overflowing because the masses need them. But if the highest level of things also begin to overflow, then this world will have no high level. Everyone will become mediocre. This sentence made Chuyang slap the table in praise. For example, the Tribulation Heaven mental cultivation technique was the best mental cultivation technique that Chuyang knew at present, but if everyone in the entire continent had a copy, then no one would be able to cultivate it to the peak. People always wanted to be unique. If they had it, others also had it, then they wouldn't care about it. At least they wouldn't cherish it so much from the bottom of their hearts. Tao is your heart. What Tao does your heart yearn for? How to find it, how to grasp it. The information contained in the jade slip. Throughout the entire jade slip, there was no martial technique at all. It was like a person who had accumulated all kinds of fragmentary insights over a long period of time. But these fragmentary insights were all-encompassing, any profession, any cultivation, any realm, any heaven and earth, any mystery they were dipped in. Every sentence recorded in this jade slip was thought-provoking. Chu Yang closed his eyes, and his heart was filled with emotions. This was what he really needed. If he found any divine technique in this jade slip, even if it was the #1 divine technique in the world since ancient times, even if it was a supreme technique that surpassed the tribulation heaven divine technique. But after all, it was a path that others had already walked, a path that had been completed, a path that had reached the end. Even if he walked it again, he would only be stepping on the footsteps of others. At that time, no matter how high his achievements were, there would be a limit. There would always be a shadow in his heart. He would always feel that there was someone in front of him that he couldn't surpass, and would never be able to surpass. But although this book didn't have any profound cultivation techniques, it was teaching him to walk a brand new path that belonged to him. Then, my path, my front is blank. Where do I want to go? Where do I want to go? This path had no end to it. There was no end to it. At Chu Yang's current cultivation, at his current realm, what he really needed the most was this. Chu Yang was already very satisfied to have obtained this insight. Then he immediately turned around. Without any hesitation, he walked out. In the room, the girl in white looked at Chu Yang in astonishment. Didn't you give him the leeway of 2 books? Why did he just read 1 book and leave? He didn't miss it at all. The white-clothed youth looked at Chu Yang with undisguised appreciation in his eyes. He said, "This is his 4th test and it was a perfect pass. In the next few years, I'm afraid that another peak-level expert will appear in this world. Together with us, he will be immortal and indestructible, an eternal existence, control the heavenly Tao and be supreme. This test is." The young man in white looked at Chu Yang's figure walking out of the room and smiled. "Greed." The girl in white nodded in understanding. Yes, not only was Chu Yang not greedy, but his control of his greed had reached a strict level. The young man in white reached out and pulled the girl into his arms. He said, you have become stupid." The girl in white smiled shyly. "I know that you understand these questions, but you still have to ask me and pretend that you don't understand. In fact, you just want me to talk more." The young man in white sighed softly. "All these years, not only me but all of you have also been lonely. We are really too lonely. But, you don't have to worry about me. I'm fine really." The girl's beautiful face showed a sense of relief. "As long as you are fine, we are all happy. We have long agreed on this." The young man in white laughed. "Don't you think that watching these little guys fooling around every day is actually a kind of fun?" The girl in white nodded in agreement. "Also, every now and then there will be new people coming in. It can be more lively." The girl in white's beautiful face showed a trace of a smile. "In fact, it is much stronger than before. Especially since Wuxia, that evil and lawless guy, came in. This world has become much livelier. You don't know, that guy has already made a few people complain to the heavens? That guy has now learned to steal things." The young man in white smiled helplessly. "It is said that little Seven has already left home. Even if you beat her to death, she will not be Wuxia's neighbor. I really can't afford to hurt her." Chapter 2549. Next month the Proud World will be finished. It's been 3 years. This month will be the last time the Proud World shines. How many 3 years are there in a person's life? And in these 3 years we have walked together. We have watched Minister Chu rise from nothing, step by step, step by step, step by step, all the way until now. Now we have reached the final moment. I have often thought, what do we have to do? Minister Chu has never fallen behind anyone. Mo Tianji controls the world. Gu Duxing is as sharp as a sword and unyielding. Dong Wushang is as majestic as a mountain, madly fighting the world. In the next month they will leave us. I think we should give our favored brothers a glorious departure. Use a selfless battle to bear witness to our 3 years of companionship. I haven't fought for votes for almost a year, but my fighting heart is still there. The Jianghu is still there. The Proud World is still there. You are still there. The battle is still there. What will happen when the Proud World unsheathed its sword after a year of silence? Do you still remember that sentence? You dance with me, Jade Sky, and I dance with you, Proud World. begging for votes, for glory, for the final bloom, for the never-before-seen number one, for the 3 years of companionship, for a clear departure next month. Let us fight until the heavens and earth are turned upside down again. Fight until the sky is dyed red again. Let the Jianghu tremble for us again. Let the world tremble for us. Let this storm rise because of us. No complaints, no regrets, no fear. Time can wear away, the battle spirit will never fade. Fight until the mountains collapse and the earth rends. Fight until the spirit returns to the bowels. The proud world is just like this. Come on, brothers and sisters. Let us shout the slogan that has been silent for a year. Who will dance with me? Who will accompany me to conquer the world? Who will allow me to be the monarch? Who will accompany me to conquer the world? Begging for votes. Fiercely smash it out. Fight. July belongs to the proud world. Fight. Begging for votes. Today 10 chapters. Let us go crazy. Chapter 2550. The white-robed girl's eyes turned into crescents as she smiled. Especially that god of fortune brother of his, he is truly the number one money grubber in the world. He has hundreds of thousands of treasures in his hands, but he still cries about being poor every day. Every day he thinks of ways to take advantage of these people's treasures. Who would be able to stand it? And Wuxia is forever helping the tyrant, fanning the flames, and looting a burning house. Last time Ling Yunpeng had just refined a treasure when he was targeted by that little bastard. He forced Ling Yunpeng to make a bet with him. In the end, Ling Yunpeng lost the bet. If you want to bet, you have to be fair. If you want to bet, you have to be fair. However, that little bastard took away the treasure when he won, and acted shamelessly when he lost. He fought and didn't admit it. This made Ling Yunpeng so angry that he fainted. By the time Ling Yunpeng went to look for him, that little bastard had already dismantled the treasure into a pile of materials, saying that he wanted to study it and mass-produce it. That's fine, but in the end he didn't produce anything. He even told Ling Yunpeng that it was for research and for the future. That's fine, but then he pestered Ling Yunpeng and asked him to refine 3 or 5 more treasures for him to practice on, saying that he would definitely be able to mass-produce it in the future. It said that Ling Yunpeng was so angry that he vomited blood. He simply joined hands with a few people to find trouble with him. But I don't know what the final result was. Let me tell you, that little bastard has really angered everyone. He definitely didn't get any better. He just didn't have the face to say it. The white-robed girl spoke excitedly, taking pleasure in Ling Yunpeng's misfortune. You've really guessed wrong this time. The white-robed youth replied. Wuxia saw that Ling Yunpeng had invited so many helpers to find trouble with him. He actually came early and said that he wanted to have a one-on-one fight with Ling Yunpeng. Ling Yunpeng also wanted to settle his grudges as soon as possible, so he agreed. But in the middle of the fight, that young man released all his wives and everyone started to fight together. Faced with so many younger brothers and sisters, the third brother was too embarrassed to fight. But Wuxia's wives were not ordinary people. They were beaten up on the spot and cried out in pain. And the helpers that Ling Yunpeng had invited were actually held hostage by Wuxia. Under a series of threats, not only did they not help Ling Yunpeng, they also attacked Ling Yunpeng. Instead they joined hands and beat up third brother. Ling Yunpeng was beaten up so badly that he went back to his Guangzhou continent with his butt and nose bruised. Ha ha ha. The white-clothed girl was rocking back and forth with laughter. She laughed so hard that tears came out of her eyes. I'm dying of laughter. That little one is too talented. That's why that guy won't target us. That's already not bad. The white-clothed young man chuckled and said, but he's playing with a monkey now, so he shouldn't have the time to cause trouble? Playing with monkeys? The white-clothed girl frowned. Yes, the world is really full of coincidences. He's in my hometown right now. Playing with a bunch of dwarves on the island, and when they have nothing to do, they will go to the bottom of the sea to fart, and then there will be earthquakes there. Or when they blow air into the sky, the wind will howl. Occasionally they will rub their snot and the volcano will erupt. In any case, natural disasters and man-made disasters happen one after another. I think, sooner or later, those dwarves will all fall apart because of him. The white-clothed holy maiden widened her eyes and laughed so hard that she almost choked. How can there be such an interesting little guy in this world? Haha, so determined. The white-clothed young man praised. The white-clothed girl also sighed softly. Chu Yang on the screen turned around without hesitation. He walked out resolutely, and looked straight ahead as he walked past hundreds of thousands of bookshelves that were full of temptation. He didn't even look back. When he reached the door, he pushed it open without hesitation and flashed out. This kind of determination and lack of reluctance made the white-clothed young man speechless. He smiled bitterly and said, "I take back my previous evaluation. This guy is really as ruthless as me when it comes to making choices. At most, he's just a little bit worse." The white-clothed girl's face was full of smiles. Suddenly she said, "This 4th level, is it really a perfect pass?" The white-clothed young man nodded and said, "It's indeed a perfect pass, but..." The white-clothed girl heard him and asked, "What? Are there any other variables?" The white-clothed young man chuckled and said, "His decisiveness, lack of greed, and ruthlessness allowed him to pass perfectly. However, there's actually a hidden secret in this 4th level. Previously, I gave him a hint that wasn't really a hint, but he didn't seem to realize it. If he understood this, he would be able to pass perfectly. So, in terms of intelligence, he's still a little bit worse than me." The white-clothed girl was stunned and said, "Is that so? What kind of hint is it? How can it be considered a perfect pass?" The white-clothed young man said in a deep voice, "Find the other book." The other book means the contents of the other half of the library. Obtaining all the contents of the library is a perfect pass. Because the other book is because of my hint. It's not greedy, but he ignored it. The white-clothed girl pondered for a long time. Suddenly she said, "The other book you're talking about, it can't be the biography that the person wrote for you that day, right?" The white-clothed young man said proudly, "Isn't it that biography? That biography that records my life experience. How wonderful, how legendary, how mythical. Even half of the library is not enough to describe it." The white-clothed girl was stunned on the spot. After a long time she said, "How can that bastard little Wuxia be as shameless as you? In the entire universe, who can be as shameless as you? It turns out that there's really no limit to a person's shamelessness." Chu Yang's front foot had just stepped out of the door when he immediately felt pain all over his body. This kind of pain was practically worse than death. It was as if every muscle in his body had been cut into 8 pieces and then sprinkled with salt, lowered to the point where it was burned on fire. Finally, it was sprinkled with chili and further conditioned. Ouch. He had just walked out of such a comfortable environment and was immediately beaten down to the 18th level of hell to be tortured. It was such a huge contrast that Chu Yang couldn't help but let out a miserable groan. "Boss is awake." Immediately there were thunderous cheers all around. Chu Yang felt as if his eyelids weighed 1,000 pounds. He tried very hard for a long time. Then, he forced himself to open his eyes with great difficulty. Then he felt a teardrop fall on his face. Mo Qingwu's beautiful face was in front of him. She was crying and laughing at the same time as she looked at him. "Is everyone still alive?" Chu Yang's eyes moved as he asked with difficulty. This was the question that Chu Yang was most concerned about. Just now in the illusion he stuttered when he spoke. But now that he woke up, he realized that it was very difficult for him to even move his tongue. But his eyes finally saw Mo Tianji, Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong. Everyone's faces were covered in tears. Everyone is alive. Alive and well. Mo Tianji sniffed. His eyes were a little red. He sighed as if to cover it up and said, "Originally, everyone was already in despair. I didn't expect to still be alive." Chu Yang chuckled and said, "Sisters-in-law, are you all well too?" "All well, all well." The sacrificial maiden and Mo Lei hurriedly answered. "Qingwu." Chu Yang's eyes moved. Mo Qingwu hurriedly wiped away her tears. "I'm fine too. I'm fine. Have a good rest. I'm right beside you." After asking all of them and getting the answer that they were safe and well, Chu Yang was finally relieved. Mo Qingji said, "The saint's doppelganger was smashed into pieces by your sword. His godly spirit was scattered into 70 to 80 parts. In the end, only one managed to escape. I reckon that even if this godly spirit really managed to escape, it's not much different from having its soul destroyed. It probably won't have anything like memories." Only then did Chu Yang feel completely relieved. Although Mo Tianji only said, "Probably won't." Since it came from Mo Tianji's mouth, Chu Yang believed that it wasn't too far from the truth. This was good. It wouldn't affect the subsequent actions. "Alright then, I really have to rest for a while." Chu Yang said softly, "Everyone help me clean up this place carefully. Tianji, send someone to bring Lure and the rest in. Seal the cave entrance completely. Modify the array outside. We need to recuperate for a while here. If we go out rashly, once we encounter a strong enemy, we'll really be wiped out. And the saint knows about this place. We have to be careful about this." Mo Tianji nodded. "I understand. Rest assured and recuperate. Leave all these things to me. Don't worry about anything. Quickly think of a way to let yourself get better. This is the most important thing. Chu Yang forced a smile. Isn't it just an exploded dantian? Don't worry. Others may not have a way, but I definitely have a way. When he said this, even Mo Tianji, who had always been calm and reserved, cheered. Everyone's worried expressions immediately turned into joy. You have a way. That's great. Luo Kadi wiped his tears. When Chu Yang was seriously injured just now, he didn't cry like this. But now that he heard that Chu Yang was fine, he was so happy that tears also flowed out. He hurriedly wiped his tears and laughed. I'm not crying. I'm really not crying. What are you all looking at? I already said that I'm not crying. Be careful or I'll hit you. Everyone burst into laughter. Mo Qingwu wiped her tears and smiled exceptionally brightly. She carefully carried Chu Yang and walked towards a room that had been tidied up. The sacrificial maiden and Mo Lei rushed in and quickly tidied up the bed. They took out brand new bedding from their space rings. The group of brothers wanted to come in and guard but were chased out by the three women to recuperate. The chatter and laughter outside also gradually grew louder. Everyone was exceptionally happy. I knew it. Boss is the Tribulation Sword Master. How can such a small injury affect him? That's right. He'll definitely be full of energy again tomorrow. That damned Mo Tianji. His words almost scared me to death. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to scare us? You almost made me cry. Don't you know that a man's tears are very precious? Everyone was happy since Chu Yang had said that his injuries weren't serious. So, they began to look for Mo Tianji to settle old scores. Chapter 2551. Because everyone felt that they had cried just now. That was too shameful. It was too damaging to the image of iron-blooded men. Especially when there were three women present when they cried. This was all Mo Tianji's fault. If they didn't find trouble with him, who would they find trouble with? They couldn't let him go no matter what. Xia Danxiong glared at him. Mo Tianji, you must give me an explanation today. I'm a dignified heavenly emperor. I have some status. But I cried in front of my subordinates. This was all your fault. You. Don't run away. Everyone caught up and dragged Mo Tianji, who was about to escape, back to the fierce tri-hall joint hearing. Mo Tianji laughed awkwardly and said, that. I didn't think of it. But, in principle, that. Mo Tianji was firmly held down by these people. He knew that it would be difficult for him to escape this calamity. Moreover, these guys had experienced great joy and great sorrow after the big battle. So, they definitely needed to vent their emotions. According to the current situation, they obviously wanted to vent their emotions on him. Mo Tianji rolled his eyes and admitted his mistake in a very straightforward manner. His posture was extremely humble as he said, no matter what, I was indeed wrong in this matter. This is an undeniable fact that cannot be erased. I think that there's nothing wrong with everyone beating me up. Of course, we were worried about Big Brother's safety at that time. Who would laugh at us? Don't you think so? Who would laugh at us? Mo Tianji saw that the complexions of these people were slowly turning for the better. So, he became even more eloquent as he sighed, I can't believe that I, the master of calculation and manipulation, have made a mistake in my calculations today. Hey, what's the use of this controlling the world, that I've learned? This makes me feel infinitely defeated. His face was full of disappointment as he spoke. Mo Tianji's eyes secretly drifted over their faces as he spoke. Sure enough, Dong Wuxiang and Luo Kadi couldn't bear it anymore. They seemed to want to comfort him. Mo Tianji was overjoyed. But he continued to sigh with even more melancholy, I seem to feel that I am somewhat powerless. I'm really tired. This job of a think tank is really tiring. It's what I should do if I do well. But if I don't, it's all my fault. Everyone's expressions were already very calm, and they even seemed to be sympathizing with a certain best actor. It turned out that the best actor in the Heaven Palace wasn't the King of Hell, but the King of Hell's brother-in-law. Seeing that his acting had succeeded, Mo Tianji followed up with another attack and used his ultimate move. He sighed and said with seemingly infinite disappointment, although Big Brother has his own way of dealing with this matter and I don't have a way of dealing with it, and I didn't know that Big Brother would have a way of dealing with it beforehand. But after all, it's still my miscalculation that caused the brothers to be so worried. If you want to beat me up to vent your anger, it's only right. Come on. As he spoke, he covered his head with both hands and squatted on the ground like a hoodlum. Everyone looked at each other. After what third MO did, who would have the nerve to go up and beat him up? Ravage his already fragile soul again? But if they didn't beat him up, when would they find such a heaven-sent opportunity again? Beating up Mo Tianji was something that everyone had been thinking about and looking forward to for a long time, but they had never been able to do it. It was really a pity to let go of this opportunity so easily. In the end, Mo Tianji still underestimated the brothers' vengeful mentality and strong desire for revenge. Luo Kadi frowned and was the first to speak. He said suspiciously, "I say this guy isn't pretending, right? The master of calculation and manipulation." As soon as this sentence came out, the group immediately echoed. Xia Danxiong frowned, "I also think that this guy is pretending." Yes, I think so too." Rui Butong fanned the flames. "This guy is really good at pretending to be pitiful. And this guy has so many tricks up his sleeve. Who knows if he really feels guilty or not? I think it's hard to believe." "That's true. Logically speaking, Mo Tianji should be very happy right now. But he's acting so sad. It's really a little fake like acting. That makes sense. It's like acting too fake. It's just too fake. This bastard is playing with us like children. He's definitely pretending. This despicable bastard is still deceiving us, deceiving our feelings. This guy is a liar. He won't change even if he dies. He's too despicable. I'm so angry. I'm going crazy. I almost fell for his trick again. I'm going crazy too. I almost got deceived by him again. I actually sympathized with him just now. What should we do? Beat him up." Mo Tianji saw that he could no longer keep up the act. Seeing that the situation was not good, he leaped up and was about to escape. However, facing the pursuit of several great experts of the present age, he was immediately thrown to the ground. He begged for mercy but no one answered. In any case, one thing was confirmed. This guy is really pretending. Wow, I'm so angry. Beat him up. Too despicable. Puff puff puff, puff puff puff, puff 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 puff. The sound of punching the sandbag accompanied by Mo Tianji's screams rang out continuously. When Chulur Taibu Tian GMO and the rest came in and saw this scene, they only saw Luo Ke and Rui Butong's excited faces, Dong Wushang and Xia Danxiong's happy faces, laughing loudly. I can finally beat him up justifiably. This feeling is simply too good. Wow, that's right. I've beaten so many people but I've never felt so good before. Beating Mo Tianji is just too good. It's too good. Again, GMO was instantly energized. He flew up and said, I'll do it too, Puff. Fuck GMO, what do you know? This has nothing to do with you. I don't know anything. But when everyone is angry I'll be angry too. If everyone feels good they'll have to bring me along. GMO was unreasonable. He went up and beat Mo Tianji while he was down. If there were grievances he would seek revenge. Puff puff puff. When Chulur rushed back and rescued Mo Tianji's face had already turned into a pig's head. His nose was bruised and his eyes were swollen. He pointed his fingers one by one and said, Good, you guys are really good. Just you wait. Everyone roared with laughter and was in high spirits. Although they were muttering in their hearts about Mo Tianji's revenge, they felt inexplicably good when they saw his current appearance. They felt satisfied as if they had finally taken this guy down from his pedestal. They were very satisfied. Today. Even if we'll be pranked by you in the future. Luo Ke and GMO sighed in satisfaction. It's worth it? Mo Tianji pointed his finger at these two mischievous fellows. He was exasperated. Man proposes, God disposes. Sooner or later you'll have to pay for what you owe. While Mo Tianji was being beaten up by everyone, Chuyang had already sunk into deep meditation. He said it casually, but he knew in his heart that the injuries he had suffered this time were not light. Not only were they not light, but it was also hard to say if he could recover completely. Even if he could recover completely, he did not know if his cultivation, which had reached the peak of the saint level, could recover to what extent he could recover. The situation this time was really not optimistic. At least, Chuyang himself did not know what the final outcome would be. The foundation of a martial artist, the Dantian, was completely shattered. That little person had also disappeared without a trace. There was no trace of him at all. This was almost an incurable injury. There was no way to treat it at all. If the physical body was injured, the muscles and bones were damaged and even the meridians were damaged, these would not be a problem. With heavy pills, great elixirs, life spring water and other top-grade healing medicines, what injury could not be healed? However, if the Dantian was damaged or even completely shattered, it was a very different situation. Although the dantian was located between the muscles and bones of the physical body and the meridians, it was an existence that existed between reality and illusion. To say that it existed was indeed true. Even an ordinary person could sense its existence by exerting force. However, to say that it could truly appear as a real individual was absolutely difficult to do. This time, Chuyang risked his life and forcefully exploded his dantian. He even turned all the little people in his dantian into power to create the most extreme attack power to destroy the enemy. However, this was an extreme method of injuring himself first and then crippling the enemy. Even if he could cripple the enemy, he would not be able to recover. What was even more unfortunate was that from the book that he had just obtained, Chuyang truly understood what this little person was and what it represented. At this moment, his intestines were almost green with regret. It turned out that this little person that he had always thought was pregnant and worried about whether they would run out of his stomach, was actually called a nascent soul. In addition to representing an extremely high level of cultivation, it was also an extremely precious source of life. In addition, it was a unique symbol of reaching a certain level in the path of cultivation. As long as he persevered in his cultivation, he would be able to smoothly reach a whole new height. But now it had all turned into nothingness. However, Chuyang was not worried. Because Chuyang knew that although he did not know what to do now, when he truly understood that book, there would definitely be a way. Perhaps this was the true meaning behind the Supreme Existence's desire to have a look at him. Regarding this, Chuyang firmly believed that his guess was not wrong. Chuyang took the heavy pill and life spring water and entered a state of meditation. However, he knew that the heavy pill that had always been omnipotent was actually ineffective this time. It was completely unable to make up for the injury this time. He could only silently mobilize the spiritual energy in his body and heal himself in the most primitive way. He could not let Mo Tianji and the others know. At this moment, Chuyang was truly grateful for one thing. It was precisely because of this that he did not have to completely despair. Chapter 2552. That was, when Chuyang was at the bottom of the lake of despair, he felt that he was about to break through, but he resisted the urge to do so. After he came out, he heard about Dong Wuxiang's matter and rushed over. He didn't have any time to break through. The enormous power that he had obtained from his breakthrough had always been hidden within his body. And it was precisely that enormous hidden power that had saved his life at the most critical moment. It also gave him a chance to make a comeback. If he had already broken through during the battle, he might not have had the chance to defeat Cloud Lord's clone. It was very likely that he would have lasted a little longer, but still had to choose this extreme path in the end. But if that was the case, he would really be finished. He would be completely finished. There would be no way to turn things around. At least the heavens are always looking after me. The heavens don't want me to die. A smile appeared on Chuyang's face. It's great that there's hope. He didn't break through immediately. Firstly, he was worried that he would destroy the underground world. Secondly, he didn't want his cultivation to be too far away from his brothers. That would hurt their confidence. A momentary choice had far-reaching consequences. It gave him a chance to make a comeback now. Chuyang sighed. Humans should be more considerate of others. Only then will there be good karma. He worked hard to gather spiritual energy into his broken dantian and started the process of rebuilding. There was a way, but it might take a long time. This didn't matter as long as there was hope. During the process of repairing his dantian bit by bit, his primordial spirit had nothing to do. He opened the book in his sea of consciousness and read it bit by bit. The more Chuyang read, the more he felt that it was mysterious. It was as if all the mysteries of the universe were in it. Finally, Chuyang's whole body shook the moment he accidentally read a certain sentence. This shook Tai Budian, Mo Qingwu and Wu Qianqian, who had been guarding at the side all this time, and they were all shocked. Chuyang was seriously injured now. Such a shake might not be a good sign. Just as they were worried but didn't dare to act rashly, they saw Chuyang suddenly open his eyes and cheer. There's finally a way. There's really a way. It can be done like this. The mysteries of creation are truly endless. There are only things that can't be imagined, but there's nothing that can't be done. The three women looked at each other in dismay. They didn't understand what he had just said. They were just about to ask when they realized that Chuyang had already closed his eyes impatiently. Tao, what is Tao? Tao is Tao. Qi? What is Qi? All the Qi in the world was formed from water. Qi was water and it was life. Therefore, Qi travels through the air, the earth, the water, the mountains, and even the living beings. It is the lifeblood of all living beings in the world. Qi was the lifeblood of all living things in the world. These words shocked Chu Yang so much that his scalp went numb. The meaning of these words was easy to understand. Everyone needs to breathe. However, on a deeper level it meant survival. All living things were living things, including plants, mountains, rocks, heaven and earth, including all living things. If there was energy, there would be meridians, and only then could one begin to cultivate. These words placed all living beings in the world on equal footing. And this was something that Chu Yang had never thought of before. Man has a body, and then there is the Tao. There is Tao in the body and Tao outside the body. The Tao in the body is nothing more than blood vessels and meridians. However, the Tao outside the body is the Tao in the world, the Tao to move forward. Man can cultivate, but can the mountains and rivers? Can the sun, moon and stars? Can all living things in the world? Can a plant or a tree? The four yes really made Chu Yang feel as if he had been enlightened. The mountains have their Tao, the sky has its Tao, the earth has its Tao, and the flowers and trees have their Tao. Just like how man has his body before his Tao, the Tao in the body has its Tao before its body. The mountains and rivers have soil, sand, and rocks as their bodies, and spring water flowing through them as their meridians. Therefore they can live forever. This principle is the same as man. The earth is the same. The Tao of heaven has the vast starry sky as its meridians, and the boundless sky as its body. Therefore it can live forever. The Tao of heaven is life, and so are the mountains and rivers. Therefore there is life everywhere, and there is death everywhere. Seeing this, Chu Yang recalled the incident where the divine soul absorbed the death aura of flowers in Luohua City. At this moment, when he compared it with these few sentences in this book, he was really enlightened. The biggest mistake in human cultivation is to cultivate the qi in the body. This is called inferior cultivation. Those who can balance the yin and yang qi are inferior cultivation. Those who can absorb the spiritual qi around their body are inferior cultivation. Those who can absorb the essence of the sun and moon are inferior cultivation. Those who can absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth are superior cultivation. Those who can cultivate with nothing are superior cultivation. Only those who can cultivate with nothing are superior cultivation. The mountains can absorb its heaviness, the water can absorb its spirituality, the sky can absorb its vastness, the earth can absorb its boundlessness, the grass can absorb its clarity, the beasts can absorb its vitality. In this way nothing can't enter my body and nothing can't help me cultivate. The world is with me and the sun and moon are with me. This is the real mystery of the mystery, the gate of the great Tao. Those who enter this door, all injuries and injuries are of no concern to them. In an instant, Chu Yang saw a bright path to a speedy recovery. Even if he had any more injuries, it would be a trivial matter. That's right. His previous thoughts and actions were too narrow-minded. Simply using the qi in his body to heal was simple and inefficient. How could it be compared with using the spiritual energy of the whole world to heal himself? That was the real essence of life that was inclusive of all things. With this as the way to heal, there was no injury that couldn't be healed quickly. As soon as Chu Yang thought of this, he understood tacitly and put it into action. He calmed his mind and used his heart to release his spirit. He released his thoughts to feel everything around him, including his bed, the air that he was in contact with, the earth beneath him, the mountain range that had condensed spiritual energy for millions of years, the starry sky, the flowers, the grass, and the millions and millions of living creatures. He used his heart to experience everything. Chu Yang didn't know how much time had passed, but he suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of joy. It was as if countless lives were cheering and jumping around beside him. He was full of novelty as he felt the power of countless lives around him. Some were light, some were heavy, some were sturdy, and some were beautiful. This was an unprecedented and wonderful journey. Chu Yang instantly fell in love with this kind of feeling, this kind of joyful feeling. Then he really had his own understanding of a sentence that he had once sneered at in this book. He also really agreed with it. Ordinary people practice with difficulty at every step. Pain is everywhere. Thousands of arrows pierce through your heart. You endure it bitterly. You call it great perseverance. I sneered at it. You don't know the joy of practice. You create pain for yourself. You are as stupid as a pig. What perseverance is there? Stupid beyond compare. This is the worst. At that time, when Chu Yang saw this sentence and thought of the hardships he had gone through, he was particularly displeased with this sentence. In this world, whose practice is full of joy and pleasure, who doesn't have a bumpy journey and struggle to survive? The hardships are indescribable. This guy is actually mocking me here. This is really preposterous. However, when he really understood the power of life and immersed himself in it, he suddenly realized that these few sentences were true and even reasonable. It turns out that this kind of endless enjoyment of practice really exists in this world. His previous actions were indeed as stupid as a pig. However, who would have known that such a mysterious way of practice actually existed? Chu Yang could only smile bitterly at this. Chapter 2553. Chu Lu hurriedly followed. My big brother doesn't need anyone. I'm going over. The smile on Mo Tianji's face froze. He stared at the ceiling and was speechless for a long time. Look at his sister and look at his own sister. Look at his wife and look at his wife. Heavens, earth, they were both big brothers and husbands. Why was there such a big difference? Comparisons were odious. Sigh. A deep sigh could be heard. Hundreds of thousands of miles away. The saint and the demon empress were still sitting opposite each other. He held his forehead and said helplessly, Demon Empress, you're with me and you even brought so many guards with you. Is there a need to? With the two of us together, is there anyone in this world who can pose a threat to us? There was a thick aura around the demon empress, forming a defensive area that was almost visible to the naked eye. Those were three rather powerful forces. They were at least at the level of a peak saint. But against the strongest lineup in front of them, it was indeed superfluous. In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, including the purple cloud heavens that had been invaded by the Heavenly Devil clan, there was absolutely no power that could keep the saint and the demon empress in check. This was already the strongest alliance in the world. Even if Zihao came back to life and Shui Leihan came back, the combination of these two best partners was still not a match. This was an absolute peak formation of strength. The demon empress smiled lightly. Isn't the reason obvious? The one I'm most worried about is you. The saint could only smile bitterly in the face of such open and above-board words. These three are the three great demon spirits of the demon emperor heaven. The demon empress smiled. I only have the confidence to face you alone when they're by my side. Don't tell me that I would do something unfavorable to you. The sage helplessly forced a smile. Wouldn't you do anything to me? The demon empress smiled coldly. The saint smiled bitterly. Looks like there's a misunderstanding between us. Misunderstanding? There is. The demon empress' smile became even colder. And there's quite a lot of it. Since it's a misunderstanding, we can talk about it openly. It's better to solve misunderstandings as soon as possible. The more it accumulates, the harder it is to solve it. Between people, the best way to get along is to confide in each other, treat each other with sincerity and openness. The sage said sincerely, no matter what, in this Heaven Imperial Court, we are all at the pinnacle of existence. Every action, every word could affect the well-being of millions of people. If there is really a misunderstanding, it's better to resolve it as soon as possible. If you are really dissatisfied with me, feel free to tell me. If there is a misunderstanding, I will try my best to explain it as long as you have patience. The sage's voice was sincere, his face was sincere, and he had an awe-inspiring righteousness. Her gaze was even more sincere. No, not only was it sincere, it was pure and innocent. Stop. Stop. Hurry up and stop. Yao Xena raised her hand with a splitting headache. Lord Saint, please don't talk to me like a friend anymore. You're making my back shiver, my heart shiver, my heart shiver. I don't think so. Could it be that we aren't friends? The sage's complexion was very bitter. You saying this makes my heart feel very uncomfortable. His complexion was extremely sorrowful and he sighed. Yuan Tianji was also your friend. Yao Xena said lightly, Zui Wuqing was also your friend, but they are all dead now. The sage was stunned and murmured, if you say so, then I really have nothing to say. The demon empress sneered, her face full of disdain. But you are the one who asked me out today. What do you want? The sage frowned. You have asked me out for several days in a row. In the extreme heaven, I don't have any friends other than you. The demon empress said matter-of-factly. You are the host, but you don't want to chat with me. Do you want me to find some juniors to chat with? The sage smiled bitterly again. The demon empress' reason, other than being barbaric, seemed to be very powerful. Most importantly, it was impeccable. Speaking of juniors, there is something that I shouldn't say, but I have to say, the sage said seriously. It seemed that the topic had only become serious at this moment. The sage straightened his back and looked at the demon empress seriously. That Dong Wushang. What is his relationship with you? I hope that you can be honest with me about this, okay? The demon empress said indifferently, there is nothing that cannot be said. Dong Wuxiang really has nothing to do with me. However, he knows my son, but their relationship can only be considered ordinary. The demon empress was absolutely telling the truth. Dong Wuxiang really had nothing to do with her. Even if there was some relationship, it was because of Yao Ningning. The key was that Yao Ningning had a good relationship with Chu Yang and Tan Tan. She even had a good relationship with GMO, Mao Tong and Mo Tianji. However, she didn't have a deep relationship with Dong Wuxiang. It seemed that they couldn't even be considered as acquaintances. Because these two people really didn't have anything in common. They could fight for each other, but forcing them to be together was really impossible. The sage frowned. Aren't you a little insincere? The demon empress smiled. This is the truth. Otherwise, what kind of relationship do you think we have? The sage laughed and said, now, the forces of the heavenly armament pavilion that fill the heavenly imperial court have already become quite powerful. What do you think about this? There are talents in every generation. Yao Xener didn't care at all. We each lead the way for 1,000,000 years. We each lead the way for 1,000,000 years. The sage chuckled and said in a low voice, we each lead the way for 1,010,000 years. Ah. The demon empress raised her eyelids. In a great river, the waves behind drive the waves in front. The waves in front die on the beach. This is a wise saying. Cloud Master, you are the leader of the waves in front. You are obviously the one who should be slapped to death on the beach the most. Master Yin chuckled. If they can be righteous and truly strive for happiness for the people of the world, then even if I, a predecessor of theirs, die on the beach, I'd still be happy. I'd be willing to do so. He shook his head and sighed. After all, we are all old. Our thinking is also very old-fashioned. We can no longer keep up with the trends of this era. Yao Xener subconsciously held her forehead. She finally felt that she had nothing to say. She really couldn't take it anymore. In the face of such a noble and righteous person with lofty ideals, she really didn't know what to say. She was deeply afraid that if she reached out in the next moment, she would splash a pot of hot tea on the Cloud Master's face. This bastard's pretentiousness had obviously reached an unfathomable level. She clearly knew that he didn't mean what he said, but she actually couldn't see any flaws. As it turned out, the strongest actor in the heavenly imperial court was neither Chu Yang nor Mo Tianji. It was this Cloud Master who was the only sage. Once the sage appeared, there was really no competition. Right at this moment, the Cloud Master's expression suddenly changed. It became extremely unsightly. The image of a saint who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitted the fate of mankind that belonged to the only sage became unusually ferocious in that instant. There was even a faint trace of hysteria. His gaze also became fierce. This expression actually lasted for an instant. It wasn't just the demon empress. Even the three great demon spirits who were relatively closer to him noticed it. The next moment he suddenly stood up. A very strange sound seemed to come from the sky. Then Guru Yun's upright body suddenly trembled. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. The sage seemed to be trying his best to control something, but in the end he couldn't control it anymore. He continuously spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood on the ground just like that. It seemed that in more than 1,000,000 years, there had never been a precedent for the only sage to do this. Seeing this, the demon empress retreated in a flash. She asked in great surprise, "What's wrong with you?" But she understood very well. This was probably the result of Chu Yang and the others succeeding, but it could actually cause such serious damage to the Cloud Master. Countless figures took the opportunity to charge out and engaged in an abnormally intense battle with those strange-looking fellows. For a moment, it was clearly a battle between two people, but at this moment, it seemed like thousands of horses and thousands of soldiers were fighting at the same time. This was also the first time that the Demon King's hook and the Mountain River sword met. Two peerless weapons had their own souls. Right now, although the Demon Empress and Venerable Cloud hadn't moved, the souls of the saber and the sword had already fought fiercely. 100,000 Demon Kings swarmed out, covering the sky and hiding the earth. 1,000,000 divine weapons surged like the wind and clouds, appearing majestically. The weapons of both sides were engaged in battle. As the true participants of the battle, the Demon Empress and the Saint didn't make any further moves. They stood quietly like deep pools and lofty mountains. Of course, this was just an illusion. In reality, both of them were using their essence, chi and spirit to control their saber and sword, watching those illusory souls fight. Their expressions were unusually serious. A battle of this level was even more dangerous than a pure physical battle. A slight difference could lead to a complete loss. In this battle, although the two of them were the initiators, they didn't have the power to stop them. The saber and sword souls of both sides were mortal enemies. Once they met, they would fight to the death. Suddenly, the saint's eyebrows twitched. Forcefully, he broke through the battlefield with his sword and turned into a shooting star in the sky. Retreating and dodging, he left the battlefield and rushed into the sky. Facing this change, the Demon Empress 1,000,000 demons also rushed up. The Demon Empress' white clothes fluttered in the wind. She turned into a long rainbow and shouted, "3 great demon spirits." The 3 great demon spirits that had been hiding in the dark immediately attacked with all their might. 3 streaks of black flowing light blocked the saint's path as if they were risking their lives. The saint shouted, "Demon Exen, you really want to go against me?" The Demon Empress snorted, "This can't be called going against you. We're just learning from each other." Before she finished speaking, the Demon King's hook flashed and flew in the sky. In the white fog, 100,000 Demon Kings roared in unison. A blood-colored saber aura turned into a shocking blood rainbow. Learning from each other, at this time she could still say such a thing. The saint was so angry that he almost vomited blood. In the distant sky, a blood-colored ray of light flew over at extreme speed. It flashed in the sky and arrived in front of the saint in an instant. Obviously, it was coming toward the saint. However, the saint had 3 great demon spirits in front of him and the Demon Empress behind him. It seemed that it was too late to help. At this critical moment, the saint roared. The long sword in his hand turned into thousands of objects the size of mountains and rivers in the starry sky and fell down with a loud bang. His whole body also turned into thousands and thousands of them in an instant. Thousands and thousands of Saint Emperors attacked at the same time. This move was almost the full strength of the Saint Emperor. The full strength of the Saint Emperor that hadn't been seen for at least hundreds of thousands of years had reappeared in the world. Boom! The 3 great demon spirits that were blocking the front groaned miserably and were sent flying like kites with broken strings. The Demon Empress also let out a muffled groan. Her body flew diagonally and was sent flying for more than 500 meters. The saint rose into the sky and met the blood-colored ray of light with extreme speed. Swish! The Demon King's hook left the Demon Empress' hand and turned into a flying rainbow. This saber was so fast that it almost surpassed the speed of flowing light. When the Demon Empress was retreating, she forcefully endured her injuries and integrated all of her cultivation into this saber. After the saber was released, she finally couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, the saint roared, "Demon Exen, are you dare?" However, even if he was a saint at this very moment, it was already too late for him to stop that blade in this situation. That saber light that was like a meteor in the sky arrived first. Without any obstruction, it cut the blood-colored ray of light that was flying through the sky. The Demon King's hook tore the souls of 100,000 demon spirits at the same time and pulled the latter half of the blood-colored ray of light straight into the sky. In a flash, it had already disappeared. The Saint Emperor received it with all his strength. However, this saber didn't slash at him but at the void in front of him. With the sharpness of the Demon King's hook, even the Saint Emperor didn't dare to receive it rashly. He could only watch as the blood-colored ray of light was cut into 2. The first half of the ray of light let out a mournful cry as if it was on the verge of death. It finally entered the Saint Emperor's body. The Saint Emperor was furious and let out a long roar towards the sky. At this moment he couldn't suppress his anger anymore. It was as if he wanted to burn the heaven and earth. The Demon Empress' white robes fluttered in the wind, and there were 2 abnormal dark red blossoms on her face, which made her even more beautiful than before. She smiled gently and said, "Your Majesty Saint Lord is indeed very knowledgeable and knowledgeable. Your cultivation is extremely profound. This little sister is truly impressed. I've lost this time spar. I've lost wholeheartedly and I'm full of admiration." Spar. Master Yun stared at Demon Exener and gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter.